Chapter 666. Li Yunyang saw that everyone was looking at him with different eyes. Some were curious, some were surprised, some were doubtful, and some were disdainful. He chuckled and said, "You don't believe me? Well, let me ask you, Chris. What do you think you Westerners have been eating since ancient times?" Chris answered without hesitation, "Bread and meat." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Yes, most of the places where Westerners lived a long time ago were cold and bitter. They needed to eat food with strong fire properties to resist the cold. Westerners, on the other hand, had a nomadic culture and a maritime culture, so their main food was bread and meat. Bread was baked in the fireplace, so it was naturally fiery and belonged to the category of hot food. Meat was also a warm and spicy food. Eating too much of it would cause one to get inflamed. However, if a person eats too much food with a strong fire attribute, they will often suffer from excessive internal heat, and slowly, their body's constitution will change." Li Yundong rolled up his sleeves and showed his arm to Chris and Lu Feier. He said with a smile, "The universe of heaven and earth is a small universe of the human body. All living things in the world had a strong ability to recover and balance themselves. Humans were the spirits of all living things, so they also had the same ability as the universe. Wherever we feel uncomfortable, our bodies will slowly adjust to it. Therefore, Westerners have been eating food with high fire properties all year round, so their bodies are slowly forced to change. And this change is, the pores will expand, the hair will grow longer and thicker, and it will be easier to dissipate heat." Lu Feier, Chris, and the others saw that although Li Yundong was a man, his skin was as delicate as porcelain, and it was difficult to see his hair with the naked eye. Lu Feier deliberately exclaimed, "Oh my God, do you still shave your hair? Are you a man?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. With a little chi, the hair on his arms suddenly stood up. This time, everyone could clearly see every open pore and erect hair on his arms. Chris's eyes widened as she whispered, How did he do this?" The people in the car were also curious. Some men also rolled up their sleeves, trying to control the opening and closing of their pores. But no matter how hard they tried, they could only make the muscles on their arms move a little. They couldn't do it as freely as Li Yundong did. Lu Feier was curious and quickly asked, "What's the matter with you? Why are your hairs standing on end at will?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Didn't you just ask me? What is the relationship between the thickness of a person's pores and the cultivation of magic? This is what I want to say. There is a lot at stake here." Then he turned to Chris and said, "Chris, do you know why Western women mature and age quickly?" Chris thought for a moment and asked tentatively, "Does it have anything to do with the size of the pores?" Li Yundong chuckled. "That's right. Westerners have been eating a lot of hot food for thousands of years, so their physique had changed greatly. Almost every Westerner was born with a strong fire nature. As for those with an exuberant fire nature, they would develop faster and mature faster. However, because of their strong fire nature, Western women had larger pores, so the vitality in their body would leak out from their pores. The larger the pores, the faster the vitality would leak out. This was why some people with especially thin pores looked much younger than ordinary people. It was because the yuan qi in their bodies did not leak out easily. Another example. Why do you sometimes feel dizzy after taking a hot bath for a long time? The reason is very simple. Because the pores are open, the qi in the body runs a little too much, so people will feel dizzy. Chris's eyes lit up, and she pointed at Li Yundong's arm. "Your arm looked like it had no pores at all just now. Was it to store the yuan qi?" she asked. Li Yundong looked at Chris with admiration and said, "Yes, as I said just now, the human body is a small universe that can store and produce essence, qi, and blood. And this essence, qi, and blood will be constantly consumed by our daily activities. So our traditional Chinese medicine advocates people to cultivate their character." What is cultivation? To repair the body's flaws and store one's own qi. To cultivate one's character is to cultivate one's own temperament, and not cause one's 5 internal organs to be out of balance because of unnecessary and excited emotions, thus causing harm and burden to the body. Chris seemed to understand something, and was silent for a moment. Chow Kefi, who was sitting behind Li Yundong, was listening attentively with sparkling eyes. Lu Feier didn't seem to understand. She dragged out her words and said, "Oh, I see. But you still haven't explained the relationship between the size of the pores and magic cultivation," Li Yundong said with a smile. "You still don't understand? Come on, give me your hand." As he said this, Li Yundong motioned for Lu Feier to reach out to his palm. Lu Feier stretched out her snow-white hand in confusion and put it in Li Yundong's palm. Li Yundong smiled and raised her hand a little. "You don't have to stick to me. You can hang in the air." Then he secretly mobilized his invisible and traceless true essence into his palm and knocked on Lu Feier's palm from the bottom up. Lu Feier suddenly retracted her hand with a scream and widened her eyes. She pinched her palm with the other hand and said in surprise, "Why did you hit me? Hey, that's not right. I was clearly some distance away from you. How did you hit me?" Li Yundong laughed and said with a smile, "Do you want to try again?" Lu Feier was surprised and curious. She quickly reached out to the top of Li Yundong's palm again. This time, she was hanging 10 centimeters in the air. She said, "I've put it down. Why don't you try again? I don't believe." Before she could finish her words, Li Yundong's palm suddenly spewed out an invisible and traceless jinqi like a fountain, shaking Lu Feier's arm. Lu Feier covered her palm with a cry and said with a sad face, "It hurts." Everyone in the car was suddenly surprised. Some people asked curiously, "It's amazing. What's going on? Is it Qigong? Come on, it's magic, right?" For a moment, everyone in the car was talking and speculating. Even the driver was so curious that he scratched his ears and cheeks and kept looking into the rearview mirror. Li Yundong said to Chris with a smile, "Chris, do you want to give it a try?" Chris was overjoyed and quickly reached out her hand. But soon, she rolled her eyes and quickly retracted her hand. She took out a hardcover book from her bag and put it under Li Yundong's palm. Li Yundong glanced at it and saw 4 golden words printed on the cover of the book. Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor. Li Yundong looked at Chris in surprise and thought to himself, "Does this girl really carry it around with her? Can she understand it?" Li Yundong smiled and exerted force in his palm again. 2 fists away, he shook the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor and sent it flying. At this time, everyone suddenly exclaimed. Even the person who said it was magic was tongue-tied. For a moment, he couldn't explain what he had seen in front of him. Lu Feier picked up the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor in surprise. She weighed it in her hand and found that the book, which was 2 fingers thick, was heavy, but Li Yundong was able to easily shake it away. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong, as if she were looking at a visitor from outer space. She grabbed Li Yundong's arm tightly and said, "Hurry up and explain, or I'll haunt you to death even if I become a ghost." Li Yundong laughed and said, "The reason is very simple." He opened the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, picked up one of the pages, and said with a smile, "Blow on it hard." Lu Feier was stunned. After taking a deep breath, she puffed up her cheeks and blew on the page. The beauty's breath was fragrant and musky. Although it was not very strong, it made the page rustle for a while. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not bad. Look, you can also make the page flutter. Why can't you understand that I just sent the book flying with qi?" Lu Feier asked curiously, "How is that the same? I'm blowing air. How are you blowing air?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's the same. When a living person is beheaded, if he has made strenuous movements, the blood that spurts out of his neck can spray up to a height of several meters. Do you know why? It's very simple. Because the qi and blood in the body were flowing violently at that time. When the head was suddenly cut off, the surging qi and blood instantly sprayed a few meters away from the narrow blood vessels. This is caused by the strong air pressure and blood pressure. Just now, when you blew the qi stored in your lungs out of your narrow mouth, the power generated can blow these pages. It's the same reason." Li Yundong spread out his palm and said, "When the human body's qi and blood circulates, it can produce a powerful force. This force generally only exists in the meridians and blood vessels. But if people go through special training, they can mobilize this running qi and spray it out of their skin pores. You ordinary people can't control the opening and closing of your pores, So you can't feel the leakage of this qi, let alone use this qi to do something. But once you can easily control the opening and closing of your pores, you can mobilize the qi of your whole body to leak out through one of your pores. In this way, you can produce extremely strong air pressure and power. Lu Feier suddenly understood. I see. But she quickly frowned and said, but what does this qi have to do with magic cultivation? What does it have to do with big pores? Li Yundong smiled and said, the bigger the pores, the harder it is to control their opening and closing. And the smaller the pores, the stronger the zhenqi that the human body can release. The stronger this qi is, the more things you can do, and the more powerful you will be. Lu Feier blinked her eyes and said, then what does it have to do with magic? Li Yundong smiled and said, of course it has something to do with magic. Everything in the world is nothing more than the 5 elements, and the 5 internal organs of the human body correspond to the 5 elements. Whichever element you want to control, you can choose which qi to release in your body. This is all the 5 elements of heaven and earth for my use. As he said this, Li Yundong turned his finger, and a ball of flame quickly jumped on his fingertip. But this flame disappeared in a flash in everyone's eyes. When they wanted to take a closer look, they saw that there was only a cloud of smoke left on Li Yundong's fingertip, leaving only a trace of memory, which kept replaying in their minds in amazement. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with her mouth open and tongue-tied. She stammered, You are really a god. Li Yundong chuckled, but his eyes were fixed on Chris. He knew that no one else in the car could understand the true meaning of his words. He had said them only for Chris. As the saying goes, the great way is easy to find, but the true way is hard to hear. If someone listened to his words, they would immediately be able to achieve the great way and achieve success in cultivation. But if someone listened to it, it would just be a fleeting cloud, and they would forget it in a blink of an eye. Li Yundong saw that Chris's eyes were flickering, and she was deep in thought. He thought to himself, Chris, you came to China with sincerity to learn cultivation. It's not that I don't know your sincerity, but I can't accept disciples casually. Whether you are this material or not, whether you are qualified to step into this threshold, depends on how much you can understand. But what Li Yundong didn't notice was that at this time, Chao Kefi, who was sitting behind him, also had a strange light in her eyes. She seemed to be so excited that she couldn't control herself. Her body was trembling slightly, and she grabbed the armrest tightly with both hands. Her fingers exerted force, and scratched 5 fingerprints on the hard iron armrest. After Li Yundong explained the principles of cultivation magic, he didn't speak again. No matter how Lu Feier asked him, he closed his eyes and didn't say a word. After about an hour's drive, the group finally arrived at the foot of Wenbi Peak in Anding County, Hainan. Everyone got out of the car and saw a green mountain rising from the ground. The mountain was beautiful, and the mountain was mainly composed of basalt and schist from the mountainside to the top. Although it was late winter, the vegetation on the mountain was lush, and the top of the mountain was surrounded by clouds and mist. After Chao Kefi got out of the car, she returned to normal. After taking a look at the mountain, she said curiously, It doesn't look particularly special. The mountain doesn't seem to be high. Lu Feier followed Li Yundong and got out of the car. At this time, she had completely worshipped Li Yundong. As soon as she heard this, she immediately patted Li Yundong on the shoulder and said with a smile, As the saying goes, the mountain is not high. If there is an immortal, it will be famous. With the powerful immortal Li here, it's hard for this place not to be famous. Lu Feier's words were unintentional, but 2 young men in Taoist robes passed by. When the 2 men heard this, they immediately became suspicious. They frowned, turned their heads, and shouted angrily, Who are you? How dare you call yourself an immortal here? Chapter 667. Their voices were not loud, but they were clearly heard by Li Yundong, Lu Feier, and the others. They were almost there. Lu Feier turned her head to take a look. She saw that although the 2 men were wearing navy blue Taoist robes that were a little gray and had black crowns on their heads, they looked a little out of place. However, the 2 of them had big eyes and thick eyebrows. Their gazes were so sharp that they seemed solid. Lu Feier stuck out her tongue, made a face at them and said, "What are you doing? I was just saying it casually. Why are you so overbearing? Besides, I didn't claim to be an immortal." The two Taoist priests glanced at Lu Feier with unkind eyes and soon looked at Li Yundong. When they saw Li Yundong, they couldn't help but be stunned and looked at him suspiciously. The two Taoist priests only felt that Li Yundong was standing in the same place. At first glance, he seemed to be no different from the tourists around him. But after looking at him a few more times, they found that this extremely young boy seemed to be integrated with the surrounding environment. It was as if he was there, and the small universe of his body and the big universe of heaven and earth were one, inseparable from each other. But this feeling only lasted for a moment. When the two Taoist priests were shocked and took a closer look, they suddenly found that Li Yundong looked like an ordinary person. The feeling of being one with heaven and man just now had disappeared. This kind of strange feeling surprised the two Taoist priests. While they were surprised and puzzled, they suddenly heard an enchanting and moving voice coming from the side. "Feier, stop talking. Let's hurry up the mountain." The two Taoist priests turned their heads and saw an extremely beautiful woman talking to Lu Feier with a smile. The two Taoist priests were shocked at the same time. They looked at each other, their eyes full of shock. For a moment, they stared at Chow Kefi blankly and couldn't move for a long time. Seeing that the two of them were looking at Chow Kefi in a daze, Lu Feier said loudly, "Hey, haven't you seen a beauty before? Are you stupid? Are you guys monks or not? You might as well renounce asceticism." Only then did the two Taoist priests come back to their senses. As if they had just woken up from a dream, they hastily bowed to Lu Feier and the others with flustered expressions, then quickly ran up the mountain. Lu Feier looked at the backs of the two of them, curled her lips and sneered. "They are Taoist priests, but they can't walk when they see a beauty." Chow Kefi pretended to be angry and glared at her. "Don't talk nonsense. Be careful of your words. Do you think no one will recognize you if you wear sunglasses?" Lu Feier giggled. "Don't be afraid. With Immortal Li here, everything will be fine." Li Yundong smiled noncommittally and said, "Let's go up the mountain. I'll be there soon." After that, they slowly climbed up the mountain. On the other hand, the two Taoist priests who had left earlier dashed all the way to the top of the mountain. The two of them ran all the way from the foot of the mountain to the top, passing through the Luck Hall, the Jade Toad Pavilion, the Yuanshan Hall, and other places. Finally, they arrived at the Tianshu Pavilion of the Seven Stars Pavilion. Finally, they found an old man in a white robe, a small black hat, and a white beard. The old man was standing on a rock and slowly waving his sword. Judging from his posture and movements, it was a move of the Taiji sword. When the two Taoist priests saw the old man, they hurriedly shouted, "Master, master!" The old man didn't look back and continued waving his sword slowly. His movements were heavy and slow, as if he was not holding a sword, but a huge rock that weighed thousands of pounds. The old man said in a long voice, "What's the matter? Look at how anxious you are. What did I teach you?" The two Taoist priests looked at each other and said in unison, "A monster has come down the mountain." The old man slowed down and looked at them with a faint smile. "Have you watched too much Journey to the West? In such a peaceful world, how could there be a monster? Besides, even if you've watched too much Journey to the West, I'm not Tang Sung." A slightly taller Taoist priest stamped his feet and said, "Oh master, don't joke around. I'm not lying to you. Go and have a look. I've never seen a woman with such a strong demonic appearance." "A woman?" The old man laughed and said, "You must have seen a woman who is too beautiful, so you think she's a monster, right? Hey, let me tell you, if you don't have any evil thoughts in your heart, even if a real monster stands in front of you, it can't be considered a monster. If there are evil thoughts in your heart, any woman you see is a monster." The two Taoist priests were so angry that they couldn't speak for a moment. After looking at each other, they rushed to the rock together and grabbed the old man's arms. Liansheng said, "Master, other people can't see it, but as two brothers have opened the heaven's eye, how could we not see it? You'll know when you come with us." "Yes, master, go and have a look." The old man's hands were grabbed. He glared at them and shouted, "What are you doing? Let go of me. Do you still know how to respect your master? What a scandal. I'm not going. Without saying a word, the two Taoist priests bent down and grabbed one leg each, lifting the old man up as if he was carrying a wooden pole. The two Taoist priests looked at each other. You almost there, the old Taoist was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. He kept hitting the two Taoist priests' heads with his hands. Hey, put me down. You guys are getting bolder and bolder. The two Taoist priests grimaced as they were beaten by the old Taoist. They tilted their heads and smiled, saying, Master, bear with it. You'll know when you see it. The old Taoist said angrily, Then put me down. I have my own legs. Don't I know how to walk? The taller Taoist smiled apologetically. Master, don't give me that. You said the same thing the last time. But when we put you down, you turned and ran. We won't fall for it this time. The shorter Taoist priest said seriously, Master, this is not us brothers fooling around. Just now when we went down the mountain, we heard someone bragging about being an immortal in front of our jade-toed palace on Pen Peak. Then we saw a woman with a strong demonic appearance hanging out with this person. In addition, the taller Taoist priest continued, in addition, we also saw a very strange person. He looked a little like a fellow Taoist, but also a little different. The old Taoist struggled for a while, but could not get down. He could only be carried by the two of them, like they were carrying a Buddha statue, causing many tourists to look at him curiously. The old Taoist looked resentful, as if he did not believe the two of them. He snorted and said, Humph, you two country bumpkins who have never seen the world. Last time, when you saw the Nikon logo, you said it was a Nike. When you saw the Cherry QQ, you said it was a luxury sports car. I've lost all my face because of you. Let's see how you will be embarrassed this time. Humph. By the way, what did you mean by fellow Taoists? What do you mean by a little different? Hey, although you two have never seen the world, your cultivation is not bad. You can't tell if a person is a cultivator or not, can you? The taller Taoist priest smiled awkwardly when he was scolded by his master. But he quickly said seriously, Master, I also think it's very strange. When I first saw him, I felt that he was no different from an ordinary person in the secular world. But after looking at him a few more times, I felt that he was a cultivator with a very high cultivation. It was as if he had become one with heaven and man, and he had become one with heaven and earth. But after I looked at him a few more times, this feeling quickly disappeared. It's very strange. The shorter Taoist priest quickly nodded. Yes, I feel the same way. The old Taoist priest was stunned. He stroked his white beard that hung down to his chest and asked curiously, Becoming one with heaven and man? How old does this person look? The taller Taoist priest said, He seems to be in his early 20s. The shorter Taoist priest also said, About the same. He looks a little younger, but he has a very mature temperament. The old Taoist priest was surprised. He looks so young, but he has such cultivation? That's impossible, right? The taller Taoist priest said, That's right. That's why we find it strange. Master, think about it. The moment we came down the mountain, we heard someone spouting nonsense as if he was trying to provoke us. Following that, we saw such an unfathomable fellow. That's not all. When we turned around, we saw a seductive woman. How could we not be nervous? How could we not think too much? If a few fellows come and our jade-toed palace defeats them, we'll lose a lot of face. The old Taoist priest scoffed. What a joke. Our jade-toed palace has always stood aloof from worldly affairs. Who would have nothing better to do than to find trouble with us? The shorter Taoist priest said, I am master. That's not how you put it. A man has no intention of hurting a tiger, but a tiger will eat a man's heart. Master, it's important to be wary of others. That's what you taught us. The taller Taoist priest hurriedly said, Yes. Master, don't be stubborn. Follow us and you will know. Helpless, the old Taoist priest could only say, All right, I'll follow you. If not, go back and copy the Vajra longevity technique 100 times. The taller Taoist priest shuddered in fear. 100 times? Master, we will die. The shorter Taoist priest said, Master, we are definitely right. Don't worry. The group quickly descended the mountain. When they walked all the way to the jade-toed pavilion, they saw a group of people walking slowly towards them. This group of people were mostly young men and women. Most of the men were handsome, and most of the women were wearing sunglasses and dressed fashionably. The taller Taoist priest who was carrying the old Taoist priest hurriedly pointed at a young man who was walking and talking. He said, "Hey master, that's him. Look." The old Taoist priest patted his head and shouted in a low voice, "Put me down." The two Taoist priests seemed to wake up from a dream and quickly put the old Taoist priest down. As soon as the old Taoist priest's feet landed on the ground, he looked at the young man. Indeed, as his two disciples had said, the man's temperament was extraordinary. After carefully looking at him for a while, he slowly stroked his beard and said, "Well, this must be a cultivator. If I'm not wrong, he has now entered the realm of heaven and man oneness." Heaven and man oneness. This is the realm of immortal golden body. Amazing, such an achievement at such a young age. It's really amazing. In modern times, the only cultivator I've heard of who has cultivated to such a realm at such a young age is Wang Yuanshan. I wonder which sect this young man belongs to and which master's disciple. The two disciples of the old Taoist priest looked at each other and said in surprise, "Immortal golden body? No way. How old is he?" They naturally knew that there were 3 levels of the golden body realm, namely, the primary level of the immortal golden body, the middle level of the immortal golden body, and the top level of the immortal golden body. Using the majestic Jinshinjinchi to protect the body, invulnerable to swords and spears, and impervious to water and fire, it was called immortal. Using heaven and man oneness, one could mobilize the 5 elements of the world at will, and be one with heaven and earth. It was called immortal. Reaching the peak, one could challenge the might of heaven and thunder, and the body of the young spirit could shine as brightly as the sun and the moon, and live as long as heaven and earth. It was called immortal. The old Taoist priest glanced at his 2 disciples and said with a smile, "Now you know that there is always someone better, don't you?" The 2 Taoist priests snorted, looked at Li Yundong with dissatisfaction, and muttered in a low voice, "What's the big deal? We are all Jinshin. Who is afraid of who?" The old Taoist priest rolled his eyes. He stroked his beard and said thoughtfully, "He has reached such a realm at such a young age. Where did such a powerful young man appear in our cultivation world recently?" The old Taoist priest's face changed. He took out a mobile phone from his pocket and quickly sent a text message. After a while his mobile phone rang. It was a MMS. The old Taoist priest opened the MMS, looked up at Li Yundong, and suddenly said, "So it's him. No wonder, no wonder." His 2 disciples leaned over to take a look, only to see that the MMS was from Du Fei of the Chuanjin Dragon sect, and there was a photo of Li Yundong on the MMS. The 2 Taoist priests looked at each other and asked, "Master, who is this?" The old Taoist priest laughed and said, "I said that you have never seen the world, but you still don't admit it. This is Super Li. He's the most famous young man in our cultivation world right now." The tall Taoist priest looked at Li Yundong unconvinced and said, "Super Li? How arrogant. I want to see how invincible he is." Chapter 668. When the old Taoist heard his disciples' words, he immediately glared at him and shouted, "What do you want? What did I teach you? Did you learn some skills just to use them to fight with others?" The tall Taoist priest shrunk his head after being reprimanded by the Taoist priest. "You almost there," the short Taoist priest thought for a moment, patted his head, and said in surprise, "Oh, I remember now. Isn't Super Li the leader of the Fox Zen school? He was the leader of a group of demons. No wonder the woman beside him is so bewitching." The old Taoist snorted twice, put the phone back into his pocket and said, "It's good that you know. Don't be so surprised in the future. The monsters are controlled by an organization, and they haven't done anything evil. Why are you so excited? Let's go. Mind your own business." The tall Taoist grabbed the old Taoist's arm and said, "No, master, look at that monster. Where have you seen such a monster?" The old Taoist impatiently followed his gaze and was stunned. He gasped and unconsciously tugged at his beard. He widened his eyes and said, "What a strong seductive aura. This is simply unheard of and unseen. The person he was looking at was Chow Kefi. Her eyebrows were like an ink painting, and her lips were like vermilion. She was like a calamity who had walked out of a painting. Her every move revealed a strange seductive charm. Wherever this extremely beautiful woman went, she would attract attention. Women who saw her would be extremely jealous, and men who saw her almost couldn't walk. The old Taoist clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "Strange, strange." It had such a heavy demonic appearance, yet there was not the slightest bit of demonic aura. How strange. I've lived for 99 years, and this is the first time I've seen such a physiognomy. The tall Taoist quickly said, "Master, I told you it was a monster. Hurry up and give it a try. Let's see where this monster came from." The old Taoist glared at him. "Nonsense. She didn't provoke you. Why did you provoke her?" After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. The short Taoist priest hurriedly advised, "Master, they don't come with good intentions. You can't let down your guard. Even if you don't provoke her, you can at least test her from afar, right? Let's find out their origins first. If they really have evil intentions, we can at least be prepared." When the old Taoist heard this, his body immediately stopped. He turned around, thought for a moment and stretched out his hand. "Give me my sword." The tall Taoist priest quickly handed him the steel sword he had taken from the old Taoist priest. However, the old Taoist priest threw it aside without even looking at it. He glared at him and said, "Bastard, give me another one." The short Taoist priest hastily took out a 2-feet-long peach-wood sword from his Taoist robe and respectfully handed it over. The old Taoist took the peach-wood sword, took out a talisman from his sleeve, and put it on the peach-wood sword. He gently blew on the peach-wood sword, and then pointed at Chow Kefi from dozens of meters away. The two Taoist priests immediately widened their eyes and stared at the talisman nervously. They knew that it was a demon-revealing talisman. Whichever monster their master pointed at with the peach-wood sword, the figure of that monster would appear on the talisman after a while. However, they had never expected that the peach-wood sword would tremble violently as the old Taoist pointed at it, as if it didn't dare to face the target it was pointing at. The old Taoist frowned, and the Junshi in his body surged. He pointed at the demon-revealing talisman on the tip of the sword and shouted in a low voice. All the Junshi in his body surged into the tip of the sword. However, as soon as his Junshi surged over, he suddenly saw the demon-revealing talisman break into pieces in an instant, and then the peach-wood sword actually burned by itself with a hiss. At this moment, the three Taoist priests were instantly dumbstruck. What kind of monster was this? It was so powerful that even the demon-revealing talisman didn't work. Even the peach-wood sword, which was dozens of meters away, was forced to spontaneously burn. The old Taoist priest stared blankly at the burning peach-wood sword in his hand, and his eyes flashed with horror. "Oh my God, what kind of monster is this? It's so powerful." The tall Taoist priest and the short Taoist priest were dumbfounded. They knew that this peach-wood sword was a Taoist magic treasure with spiritual nature. Although it was not very powerful, it was still a spiritual item. If it hadn't encountered a terrifying monster just now, it would definitely not have been like this. The tall Taoist priest stared blankly for a moment before his eyes suddenly flashed with killing intent. He gritted his teeth and immediately took out a copper bell from his bosom. He fiercely stared at Chow Kefi and raised his foot to rush toward her. Just as he moved, he was stopped by his master. The old Taoist priest glared at him and shouted, "What are you doing?" The tall Taoist priest gritted his teeth and said, "Subdue the demon." The old Taoist priest laughed angrily. "You? What kind of demon did you subdue? And what kind of demon did you get rid of? Aren't you afraid of being subdued by others?" The tall Taoist priest frowned and said angrily, "It's my wish to kill the demon and die for the Tao." The short Taoist priest's blood was also boiling, and his face was determined. "Senior brother, I'll go with you." The old Taoist priest shouted angrily in a low voice, "Bastard! You two bastards! I worked so hard to bring you out, and I still expect you to inherit my mantle. Are you going to die just like that? Besides, how do you know that the other party must be a demon? If the other party is really a demon, Why is there no demonic aura on her? How do you explain this? The tall Taoist priest said anxiously. But master, didn't you see that the demon-revealing talisman and the peachwood sword cracked and burned when they were pointed at the demon? If this is not a demon, what is it? How do you explain this? The old Taoist priest's face darkened, and he said in a low voice, even if it's a demon, it's a rare demon for thousands of years. Yue's he said this, he looked at Chow Kefi from afar and said in a deep voice, as far as I can see, this person has no demonic aura at all, but her demonic aura is exposed. Moreover, when the peachwood sword with pure yang power is pointed at her, it can spontaneously burn. This shows that the supreme demon aura in this person's body is incredibly powerful. But there is no leakage of her demon aura. This means that either she has cultivated to the peak state and returned to nature, or her demon aura and spiritual power are hidden deep in her body, and her soul consciousness has not been awakened. Otherwise, there will be more or less leakage of demon aura. The short Taoist priest said, Master, are we just going to watch here? The old Taoist priest pondered for a while and said, don't worry. I'll go and meet this Li Yundong. The tall Taoist priest said in surprise, Master, why are you going to find this guy? This guy is in cahoots with the demon and is willing to degenerate himself. Wouldn't it be a disgrace to go to such a person? The old Taoist priest glared at him and said, Face, is face so important? Besides, I've heard Shirji Dufei talk about this guy. Dufei speaks highly of him. He is a gentleman and doesn't seem to be an evil person. The tall Taoist priest snorted bitterly and said, You may know a person's face but not his heart. Who knows? You two wait for me here. Don't move without my orders. The old Taoist priest ignored him, turned around, and walked toward Li Yundong after saying these words. The tall Taoist priest snorted and turned his face to one side. The short Taoist priest quickly took a step forward and said with concern, Master, be careful. The old Taoist priest waved his hand and left without looking back. Li Yundong and the others were leisurely watching the surrounding scenery in the Jade Toad Pavilion of Pen Peak. Along the way, Lu Feier kept pestering him with questions. Every time they passed a scenic spot, Li Yundong would introduce the historical stories of these scenic spots. Coincidentally, if Li Yundong had gone to other scenic spots, he might not have known these historical stories. However, Pen Peak was a famous Taoist mountain. He had read many cultivation books in the spirit space, so he knew these things like the back of his hand. The group of people walked under the octagonal building with flying eaves and arches, while listening to Li Yundong speak with fervor and assurance. The Jade Toad Pavilion you see now is dedicated to a great figure in the history of our Chinese cultivation world. This person is called Bai Yuchan, formerly known as Guchanggung. He was one of the 5 ancestors of the South sect of Jindan sect during the Southern Song dynasty. He was also the official founder of the South sect of Jindan sect. And the Jindan sect played an important role in the history of our Chinese Taoism. Lu Feier was curious and couldn't help but ask, Is this Bai Yuchan powerful? Are you more powerful, or is he more powerful? Li Yundong laughed involuntarily. Bai Yuchan was a grandmaster who founded the Jindan sect's South sect. Hainan was originally a barren land for Taoism, but he preached the Tao and eventually spread Taoism here. How can I compare to such a grandmaster? Lu Feier rolled her eyes and asked, Then who is in charge here now? Is it also the successor of this Jindan sect? Li Yundong shook his head. I'm not sure about that. Maybe Zi Yuan knows more. She might know. Lu Feier was about to speak again, but she saw an old man in a Taoist robe walking over. The old man looked at her with a smile and said, Miss, can you step aside? Lu Feier was a little puzzled, so she stepped aside. The old Taoist walked up to Li Yundong, made a Taoist salute with one hand, and said, Zhenrenli. Li Yundong saw that although the old Taoist's beard was white, his eyes were bright, and his voice was loud. Although he was relatively thin, the muscles that were exposed outside his clothes were strong and hard. What surprised Li Yundong was that the old Taoist in front of him was obviously a cultivator. But he couldn't tell what realm he was at all. Has this old Taoist returned to his original state? Li Yundong guessed in surprise. In his opinion, The old Taoist's cultivation was at least at the level of a mortal Jinshin. Only those who had reached this level could truly return to their original state, and they might even be masters of thunder retribution. Li Yundong didn't dare to be negligent. He respectfully returned the salute and said with a smile, "I don't dare. I haven't asked your name yet." The old Taoist smiled slightly, pointed to a remote corner not far away, and said, "Can I have a word with you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay." After that, he turned around and said to Chris, Lu Feier, Chow Kefi, and the others, "Wait for me here. I'll be back later." Seeing Li Yundong leave with the old Taoist, Lu Feier stretched her neck and looked for a while. Suddenly, she turned her head and said excitedly to Chow Kefi, "Hey, Sister Chow, are there really such cultivation sects? It's so interesting." But as she spoke, she saw that Chow Kefi's expression was a little unnatural. She looked at the old Taoist with a hint of vigilance in her eyes. Lu Feier was stunned. "Sister Chow, what's wrong with you? Do you know this Taoist?" Chow Kefi suddenly came to her senses. She smiled and said, "I don't know him. I'm just a little uncomfortable." Lu Feier didn't doubt her. "Oh," she said, still looking at Li Yundong not far away with interest. After Li Yundong followed the old Taoist to a corner, he saw the old Taoist stop and look at Li Yundong with a smile. He said, "I am the 21st generation successor of the Chuanjin Dragon sect, Zhang Jishuan, the abbot of the Yuchan Palace. Zhenren, may you live a long life." Li Yundong immediately laughed. "So it's a senior of the Chuanjin Dragon sect. May I know how to address you in Dufei?" Zhang Jishuan smiled slightly. "That's my little Shirji." Li Yundong suddenly understood and saluted. "Sorry for not recognizing you. What can I do for you, senior?" The smile on Zhang Jishuan's face suddenly disappeared. His face was serious, and his words were shocking. He said, "Zhenren, with all due respect, don't you know that you are in danger, and that a catastrophe is imminent?" A few words of nonsense. Some people say, "Why are there so many Jinshin masters? How many of them can pop up everywhere? Come on, it's so fresh. There are tens of millions of believers in Huaxin sect, and there are hundreds of thousands of cultivators who practice hard. Is it difficult to have dozens of Jinshin masters among so many people? Are you kidding me? Besides, some people say that in the later stages of the book, there are more and more Jinshin masters like cabbages. Classmate, when you were poor, did you hang out with those who were as poor as you all day long? When you were rich, did the people around you slowly start to change? Did you become rich and have more friends? When you became a millionaire, did you find that there were so many multimillionaires? When you became a millionaire, did you find that there were so many billionaires? When you reach the level of a billionaire, you will realize that there are actually so many billionaires in this world. This principle is the same as cultivation. The higher your level, the higher the realm, and the higher the level of people you meet. Yes, I know that most people can't come into contact with this level, but please, can't you just watch it quietly? Besides, who told you that this sect in Hainan is a small sect? Go Baidu and find out who this old Taoist Zhang Jishuan is. Chapter 669. When Li Yundong heard Zhang Jishuan's horrifying words, he was shocked and asked with a serious face, "Senior Zhang, I don't know why you said that." Zhang Jishuan stared into Li Yundong's eyes and said, "You really didn't notice it at all?" Li Yundong said respectfully, "Senior, please give me some advice." Zhang Jishuan frowned secretly and said, "Don't you feel anything unusual around you?" "Unusual?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Senior, please tell me." Zhang Jishuan had lived for nearly 100 years. Of course, he knew that it was better to be polite to everyone he met. However, for the sake of Du Fei's high evaluation of Li Yundong, he wanted to warn the young man in front of him out of kindness, but he didn't want to force himself to do it. You soon, although Li Yundong was straightforward, he still thought for a moment and said meaningfully, "Zhenren, it's not easy for you to have such a realm at such a young age. You have to cherish it. I'll give you a word of advice. Please remember it." Li Yundong bowed and said, "Senior, please enlighten me." Zhang Jishuan said. Remember, essence nourishes the real root. Qi nourishes the spirit. Yuanyang does not go to the true. Dantian nourishes the treasure of longevity. And 10,000 taels of gold does not belong to others. You must not be greedy for beauty and indulge in it. And in the end, lose your treasure of longevity. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he said, Isn't this the boxing scripture of Xingyi boxing? Is he referring to the relationship between me and Su Chan? Yes, that should be it. Maybe Jinren Du told him. Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, Thank you for your guidance, Jinren Zhang. I'll keep it in mind. Zhang Jishuan saw that Li Yundong could still accept his words with a smile. He couldn't help but think highly of the young cultivator in front of him. He laughed and said, Of course, I can see that Jinren Li is still a Yuanyang child, which is rare and commendable. But the way of cultivation is like sailing against the current. If you don't move forward, you will fall back. It's like going into the abyss in the middle of the night. If you're not careful, you will be crushed. Jinren Li, you must remember to grasp your true self. Don't be blinded by the illusions of the world. Li Yundong solemnly bowed and said, I will remember your teachings. Zhang Jishuan was about to speak again, when he suddenly heard the sound of a man and a woman arguing not far away. The two of them looked in the direction of the sound and saw a man in a suit and leather shoes arguing with a brown blue-eyed foreign woman. When Li Yundong saw them, he was stunned for a moment and thought to himself, Isn't this Zhao Yuzhen and Justin? What were they doing here? Li Yunyang saw that Justin was talking to Zhao Yuzhen fiercely. Her expression was full of indignation and resentment, while Zhao Yuzhen was explaining something to Justin with a helpless expression. Neither Li Yunyang nor Zhang Jishuan were very proficient in bird language, so they didn't understand what they were talking about for a moment. But soon, they saw Justin suddenly see Chao Kefi and the others. She immediately rushed to Chao Kefi, pointed at Zhao Yuzhen, and said in English, You can't fire me. I was invited by him. Chao Kefi hadn't expected that they would meet Justin and Zhao Yuzhen here. She was shocked and quickly sneered, You're wrong. You were invited by us. Of course, we can fire you. Besides, it's not us who started the trouble, but you, Miss Justin. Forget all of this. It's all over. If you don't believe me, go and ask Zhao Yuzhen. Let's see if he dares to interfere in your business. Justin immediately turned her head to look at Zhao Yuzhen. Zhao Yuzhen didn't expect that he would meet Chao Kefi and the others here when he took Justin out to relax. The most damn thing was that he didn't want to reveal himself in this matter, so he secretly encouraged Justin to make trouble for them. But now, even a fool knew that he was the one who had ordered it. Zhao Yuzhen was so angry that his teeth itched. It was fine when he brought Justin out, but this girl touched his sore spot. She always asked him to stand up for her. But how could he dare to stand up for her? If it was just Chao Kefi, it would be fine. But the problem was that now Li Yunyang was involved. It was too late for him to run away. How could he dare to show up? This damned B*TCH. If I had known it would be so difficult, I wouldn't have provoked her. Even I don't dare to provoke someone. But you don't know what's good for you. Zhao Yuzhen cursed in his heart. But in order to pretend to be a big shot in front of a beautiful woman, he had bragged a little too much. So now he couldn't get out of the situation for a while. Zhao Yuzhen saw Justin looking at him. He was about to say something. But from the corner of his eyes, he saw Li Yundong looking at him not far away. Zhao Yuzhen was scared out of his wits. Why does this little bastard always run into me? Wherever I am, he is there. Why is that? But soon, Zhao Yuzhen thought of a more serious thing. His mind suddenly went blank. He thought to himself, Damn it, this little bastard must have found out that I was the one who ordered Justin to go on strike. He won't take revenge on me, will he? If he holds a grudge against me, then he will plot against me a few times in the future. I will be dead for sure. Zhao Yuzhen didn't even look at Justin. He quickly rushed to Li Yundong and said with a pitiful face, Childly, don't listen to this bitch's nonsense. She doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I didn't instigate her. You have to believe me. Li Yundong was not a fool. With just a glance, he understood the cause and effect of the matter. His heart was like a mirror, but he didn't say anything. He just said with a faint smile, Mr. Zhao, I didn't say anything. Why are you in such a hurry to explain? Zhao Yuzhen opened his mouth and immediately realized that he had a guilty conscience. He confessed without being forced to do so. He wanted to jump up and slap himself in the face. Zhao Yuzhen smiled dryly and stammered, "Childly, you are a magnanimous person. Don't argue with her. I promise I will never appear in front of you again, okay?" Li Yundong saw that Zhao Yogan's words were somewhat incoherent. It was obvious that he was so scared that he was incoherent. At this time, the abbot of the Jade Toad Palace, Zhenrenzhang Jishuan, was in front of him. He didn't want others to say that he was aggressive, so he smiled and said, "Mr. Zhao, I don't understand what you're saying. The world is so big. It's your own business where you want to go. I'll be there soon. However, I want to give you a piece of advice. If you do too much evil, you will bring about your own destruction. You have to accumulate some good karma, Mr. Zhao. Otherwise, you will be in big trouble in the future." Although Zhang Jishuan didn't know what had happened here, when he saw that Li Yundong had given some of the words he had said to Zhao Yuzhen in front of him, he immediately grinned and thought to himself, "Hey, this boy is a little interesting. He's so young, but he talks more like an old man than me." When Zhao Yuzhen heard Li Yundong's words and saw that he actually didn't want to argue with him, he was immediately overjoyed. He hurriedly nodded and bowed, saying, Yes, Childly is right." Although Justin didn't understand what Zhao Yuzhen and Li Yundong were talking about, she could tell what had happened just by looking at their expressions. She immediately widened her eyes and said to Zhao Yuzhen, "You lied to me. You said that you were the biggest boss in this crew, so I listened to you. Otherwise Zhao Yuzhen didn't know that Li Yundong's English was so bad that he could hardly understand what they were talking about. But because of his guilty conscience, he was so scared that his back broke out in a cold sweat. For a moment, anger rose in his heart, and evil grew in his heart. There was a fierce light in his eyes. He turned around and slapped Justin in the face. He glared at her fiercely and spat out a few murderous words from between his teeth. "Shut up." When Zhao Yuzhen turned his face, it immediately turned into a flattering smile. "Childly, don't listen to her nonsense. This B*TCH will do anything in order to be promoted." Li Yundong smiled, which looked a little mysterious. He said, "I'm not interested in knowing about you and her." Zhao Yuzhen nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, Yes, Childly is magnanimous. Naturally, he won't argue with us. Let's go. As he said this, he pulled Justin and shouted angrily in a low voice, "Idiot, come with me." Justin had never suffered like this before. She was stunned for a moment. She was dragged more than 10 meters away by Zhao Yuzhen before she suddenly came to her senses. She screamed and fought with Zhao Yuzhen regardless of the situation. Zhao Yuzhen was furious. He slapped Justin hard in the face and made her tumble. Then he left in a huff. Justin cried on the ground for a while before she slowly got up and left, choking with sobs. Zhao Yuzhen left Justin alone all the way. He measured Li Yundong's gentlemanly heart with his own mean mind. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Li Yundong would take revenge on him. He was frightened, as if he was running away. He returned to the place where he was staying, picked up his luggage, and rushed to the airport to fly back to Shenzhen. Then, he took the high-speed train from Shenzhen back to Tiannan City. After arriving in Tiannan City, Zhao Yuzhen felt that he was very far away from Li Yundong. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. After dragging his luggage out of the railway station, he called his sweetheart. He thought in a mess, "Damn it, I didn't eat fish, but I got a fishy smell. Li Yundong, this little bastard, is really my nemesis. If he appears anywhere in the future, I'll take a detour. By the way, I'll close that tea house when I get back, so as not to cause trouble for me." Zhao Yuzhen was full of thoughts when he suddenly saw a young beggar with a broken arm dragging his body to him and shouting at him, as if he wanted to beg him. Zhao Yuzhen had nowhere to vent his anger, so he didn't have the mood to do a good deed. He kicked him and shouted, "Get out of my way!" When the beggar heard his voice, he was stunned for a moment, and then he raised his head. When he saw it, His eyes suddenly widened, and his face showed ecstasy. He shouted and rushed toward Zhao Yuzhen. One of his broken arms grabbed Zhao Yugen's thigh, and the other hand grabbed Zhao Yugen's palm. He quickly and quietly stuffed a ball of paper into Zhao Yugen's palm. When Zhao Yuzhen saw the beggar rushing over, he was shocked and angry. Just as he was about to scold him, he suddenly saw that the beggar's face had been beaten black and blue, and there were scars everywhere. The broken arm was wrapped with a broken paper bag, and it looked like a wooden stake. It was very terrible. But the most frightening thing was that as soon as the young beggar opened his mouth, he revealed a piece of broken tongue. The wounds were all new. When he was excited, blood even came out of his mouth, which made people's hair stand on end at first glance. Zhao Yuzhen was so scared that he had goosebumps all over his body. Just as he was about to drive the beggar away, he saw two middle-aged beggars rushing out of nowhere and dragging the young beggar away. Zhao Yuzhen shivered and watched the young beggar struggle crazily and roar at him. He unconsciously clenched his hand, and only then did he realize that there was a ball of paper in his palm. Zhao Yuzhen opened it and saw a line of crooked words written on it. It was scribbled and distorted, as if it had been written in extreme tension and fear. It read, "I am Shenyu, the son of Shen Wankai. Whoever saves me will be rewarded handsomely." It would have been better if Zhao Yuzhen hadn't read it. As soon as he saw it, he sneered and thought to himself, "If you are the son of Shen Wankai, then I am the son of the Jade Emperor. Are you kidding me? How could Shen Wansai's son end up like this?" Without saying a word, Zhao Yuzhen rolled the paper into a ball and threw it aside. Chapter 670. Zhao Yuzhen threw the ball of paper aside, which rolled on the ground and fell into the sewer. Shenyu, who had been dragged away, watched helplessly as the paper he had painstakingly written at the risk of his life was thrown away by Zhao Yuzhen so casually. He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he struggled fiercely and broke free from the hands of the two beggars. Then with a wild roar, he pounced on Zhao Yuzhen like a madman. Zhao Yuzhen saw Shenyu pouncing on him like a wild beast. His face was so horrible and ferocious that it was terrifying. He was so scared that he stood there in a daze and didn't even know how to hide. Shenyu pounced on him and bit Zhao Yugen's neck. Zhao Yuzhen roared. In his anger and pain, a force surged out of his body and pushed Shenyu away. He saw that Shenyu's mouth was full of blood, and he couldn't tell whether it was Shenyu's or his own. In anger, he touched his neck with his hand and suddenly took a deep breath. He said angrily, "F***CK, how dare you bite me? Don't run. Hey you." Before Zhao Yuzhen could finish his words, he saw the two beggars rush to Shenyu like a gust of wind. One hugged his legs, and the other hugged his body. They held him skillfully, turned around and ran away. Obviously, they had done this kind of thing many times. Zhao Yuzhen was shocked and angry. He covered the burning wound on his neck with his hand and roared, "Hey, don't run. You want to run away after biting me?" But the two beggars ran very fast. After a few turns in the crowd, they disappeared, leaving only Zhao Yuzhen stamping his feet and cursing. By the time the security guards and patrolmen of the station came over slowly, the two beggars had already disappeared. Zhao Yuzhen roared angrily, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and arrest them. What are you doing? Call the police and arrest them. Can't you see that I've been bitten like this?" But the patrolman tried to persuade him. "Oh, these beggar gang members are running around everywhere. Where can you catch them? Just admit your bad luck." Zhao Yuzhen was furious and shouted, "Bullsh**T. Your director is my best friend. Do you want to quit your job by saying that?" The patrolman's face stiffened, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. "Then come back with us now and make a statement. Only after we have filed a case can we proceed with the arrest." Zhao Yuzhen said angrily, "Bullsh**T. How long can we wait? He has already gone to Mars." He was about to continue cursing when he saw a pointy-faced beauty panting and running towards him. It was his mistress. The pointy-faced beauty ran up to him and looked at the blood on Zhao Yugen's neck in horror. She asked in surprise, "Mr. Zhao, what's wrong with you?" Zhao Yuzhen had no place to vent his anger, and he was used to hitting women. Without saying a word, He raised his hand and slapped her. The pointy-faced beauty dodged subconsciously, and Zhao Yujin was furious. He raised his hand and was about to hit her again. How dare you dodge? F***ck. Who told you to hide? The patrolman next to him couldn't stand it anymore. He shouted, Hey, don't hit her. Zhao Yujin glared at him rudely and said, I just hit her. What do you want? Ask her, when did I hit her? The pointy-faced beauty trembled slightly, but she smiled obsequiously and said to the patrolman, No, he didn't hit me. It's okay. Zhao Yujin glared at the patrolman and said, Did you hear that? I hit my own woman. It's none of your business. If you have the ability, go and catch those people who committed the crime just now. Why are you so rude to me? The patrolman snorted angrily, turned around and left. He waved to the security guards and other auxiliary policemen next to him and said, Let's go. Don't look at her. There's no need to talk to such people. The group of people turned around and left. As they walked, they sneered disdainfully and said, You are so beautiful, but you have to be the mistress of a rich man. You deserve to be beaten. Hearing this, the pointy-faced beauty's eyes flashed with shame and resentment, but this emotion only lasted for a moment. Soon, she smiled again and carefully served Zhao Yujin to his car. After getting in the car, the pointy-faced beauty sat in the driver's seat and tentatively said to Zhao Yujin, Mr. Zhao, where are we going? Zhao Yujin was furious. He slapped her again and said, Nonsense, of course we're going to the hospital. Are you blind? This time, the pointy-faced beauty didn't dare to dodge again. Her face was burning with the slap, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. But she didn't dare to speak. She quietly wiped away her tears and drove the car to the hospital. Along the way, Zhao Yujin pressed the wound on his neck. He shouted in pain, kept cursing the pointy-faced beauty, and kept urging her to drive faster. The pointy-faced beauty smiled and asked carefully, Mr. Zhao, who did this to you? If you catch him, you can't let him go. Zhao Yujin snorted angrily and cursed, Damn it, you're just a damn beggar. How dare you say you're? Before he could finish his words, the expression on Shen Yu's face when he had rushed at him flashed across his mind. Zhao Yujin was stunned, and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. He thought to himself, why did this beggar say that he was Shen Wansai's son instead of anyone else? Why was he so angry and crazy after I threw him the note? Could it be? Zhao Yogan's eyes suddenly widened, and his mouth opened wide. He was shocked and said, No way. How could Shen Wansai's son end up like this? This is impossible, isn't it? But the more he thought about it, the more suspicious he felt. He took out his mobile phone and made a phone call. But he couldn't call Shen Wankai directly, so he took a detour and called Shen Yu's former secretary. But after calling, the secretary stammered and said that Shen Yu had already traveled abroad, and it would be a long time before he came back. Zhao Yujin was stunned. After hanging up the phone, he made a few more calls in a row, but he couldn't find Shen Yu. When he asked, the other party said that they couldn't find Shen Yu's whereabouts. Zhao Yujin put down his mobile phone with a thoughtful look on his face, but he couldn't help getting excited in his heart. If this is true, then Shen Wankai will owe me a big favor if I help Mr. Shen find his son. With his support in the future, I don't have to be afraid of Li Jiandong, that little bastard. The more Zhao Yujin thought about it, the more excited he became. He slapped his thigh and said loudly to the pointy-faced beauty, Hurry up, drive to the Shen family. The pointy-faced beauty was stunned. Mr. Zhao, go to the Shen family? Which Shen family? Zhao Yujin shouted angrily. Nonsense, which Shen family is there in Tian'an City? Of course it's the Shen family. The pointy-faced beauty asked in confusion. But Mr. Zhao, the wound on your neck. Zhao Yujin slapped her again and roared. F***ck, just do what I say. Why are you still asking? Hurry up. He slapped the pointy-faced beauty in the face. The pointy-faced beauty subconsciously shrank her neck and tilted her hand. Immediately, the car rushed into the crosswalk and hit a telephone pole with a bang. Fortunately, no one was hurt. Zhao Yujin didn't wear a seatbelt, so his head hit the glass hard. His neck was already bleeding from the bite. With such a hit, the blood vessels in his neck suddenly burst, and a lot of blood flowed out. He passed out. The pointy-faced beauty was wearing a seat belt, so she was fine. However, she was so scared by the scene in front of her that her mind went blank. She knew that Zhao Yujin would beat her if he was not careful. Now that she had caused such a big trouble, wouldn't Zhao Yujin kill her? The pointy-faced beauty tried to feel Zhao Yugen's breath, but found that he was not breathing at all. This scared her out of her wits. In a panic, she immediately drove away crazily. At this time, she didn't dare to go to the Shin family, nor did she dare to go to the hospital. She drove back to the golden house that Zhao Yujin had prepared for her. When she returned to her residence, she parked the car in the garage. She made a phone call while crying. After a while, a round-faced beauty came to her house. It was a sister who had served Zhao Yujin with her in the past. She was also his mistress. As soon as the pointy-faced beauty saw her sister, she immediately hugged her and burst into tears. The round-faced beauty quickly comforted her in a low voice. After asking her what had happened, she thought for a while with a frightened look. Then, she gritted her teeth and whispered a few words in the pointy-faced beauty's ear. The pointy-faced beauty was so scared that her face turned pale. "It's illegal." The round-faced beauty gritted her teeth and said, "No one will find out in a few days. When we sell all the bastards' things, we will run away. They won't be able to find us." The pointy-faced beauty looked at Zhao Yujin in panic. But what if he can still be saved? The round-faced beauty gritted her teeth and said, "Haven't you been beaten by him enough? Do you still want to live like this?" The pointy-faced beauty remembered that Zhao Yujin had beaten her regardless of the occasion and time. She suddenly became angry and dared to do so. With a ferocious look on her face, she nodded to her sister. After they made up their minds, they stayed up late at night, trembling with fear. Then they drove Zhao Yujin out of the city and to a remote riverside. They put Zhao Yujin in a sack, stuffed a few big and heavy stones into the sack, and tied the sack tightly with a strong rope. The two men laboriously carried the sack to the riverside and threw it hard. With a splash, Zhao Yujin, who was in the sack, suddenly woke up as if he knew that he was going to die. He struggled and screamed crazily, but it was too late. As soon as he struggled, his body slowly sank into the water. With his life and Shin Yu's secret, he disappeared from this world forever. The pointy-faced beauty and the round-faced beauty didn't expect that Zhao Yujin was still alive. They were scared out of their wits and quickly drove away from the scene. They didn't know how big of a disaster they had caused by sinking their corpses into the sea this time. Just as Zhao Yujin was half drowned by his little sweetheart and died with a grievance, an unexpected guest suddenly came to Li Yundong's hotel room. Chapter 671. After saying goodbye to Zhang Jishuan, Li Yundong returned to the hotel where he was staying. He hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door of his room early and began to meditate in his room. Soon, but when he opened his eyes, he suddenly found a rather thin figure standing in his room. This person was wearing a white gown and a small black hat. It was Zhang Jishuan. Li Yundong was shocked. He quickly got up and bowed. "Jinren Zhang, may I ask why you are visiting me so late at night?" Zhang Jishuan waved his hand with a smile and said, "Jinren Li, you don't have to be so polite. Sit down and talk." Li Yundong laughed and politely pointed to a chair in the room. "Jinren Zhang, please sit down." After Zhang Jishuan sat down, he took out 8 thread-bound books that were as thick as his pinky finger from his sleeve like a magic trick. He held the 8 books in both hands and said, "Jinren Li, I came here late tonight for nothing else but to exchange pointers with you." Li Yundong was stunned. He took the 8 books and glanced at them. He saw a few big white words written on them. Vajra longevity skill. Li Yundong asked curiously, "Jinren Zhang, this is?" Zhang Jishuan laughed and said, "These are some of my experiences in the past 80 years of cultivation. Please give me more advice, Jinren Li." Li Yundong was surprised and confused. He thought to himself, this Jinren Zhang Jishuan is really strange. Who would come to someone else's room in the middle of the night to offer a book? Moreover, Why did he give it to me instead of others? This should be his 80 years of hard work, right? Why did he give it to a stranger for no reason? Zhang Zhishuan seemed to have guessed what Li Yundong was thinking. He laughed and said, "Jinrenli, you don't have to worry. Listen to me. If you understand, you will know why I came to visit you so abruptly." Li Yundong calmed down and said, "Please enlighten me, Jinren Zhang." Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand and said, "I don't dare to enlighten you. Jinrenli, I was born in 1912. At that time, the revolution of 1911 ended, and the Republic of China was established. After that, I experienced the National Protection War, the Law Protection War, the Warlord War, the Kuomintang War, the Anti-Japanese War, and the Liberation War. Until today, it can be said that I have spent half my life in the flames of war. Do you know what I felt the most during the war?" Li Yundong looked at the old Taoist elder in front of him with some respect. He shook his head and said, "I don't know." Zhang Zhishuan sighed and said, "In this era of war, my biggest feeling is that human life is really worthless. At that time, the whole world seemed to have gone crazy. Everyone was killing each other. No one believed in Tao, and no one cultivated. All the cultivation sects fell into a terrible disaster. In this calamity, countless cultivation manuals were either lost or burned. The essence of our Taoism has almost been lost. How regrettable. But when the war finally ended, do you know what I lamented the most?" Li Yunyang thought for a moment and said tentatively, "Are you lamenting that although the war is over, the Hua cultivation world has been completely destroyed? No one knows Taoism, and no one cultivates Taoism?" Zhang Zhishuan opened his mouth wide and looked at Li Yundong as if he had met a bosom friend. He slapped his thigh and said excitedly, "That's right. I told you that my eyes couldn't have been wrong about Jinrenli, but my two disciples didn't believe me." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Jinren Zhang, you flatter me. I'm just a junior in the cultivation world." Zhang Zhishuan smiled and continued, "From the early 1950s to the end of the 1980s, I had been cultivating in seclusion and didn't care about the affairs of the world. But later, the country reformed and opened up, and gradually let go of the control of the cultivation world. I saw that the cultivation world had declined to the extreme, and all kinds of cultivation methods were mixed up, and it was difficult to distinguish the true from the false. Therefore, I came out of seclusion and taught everyone my lifelong experience, the 8-part Vajra skill, and the longevity skill. So, Jinrenli, don't think that what you have in your hand is a secret. In fact, this is a Taoist classic that anyone can buy and learn. It's not a great thing, haha." Li Yundong naturally didn't believe what Zhang Zhishuan had said. This was just something that could be bought everywhere. Zhang Zhishuan was laughing at himself. What kind of decline does the cultivation world have to be for such a Taoist master to say such a thing? Li Yundong said with awe, "Jinren Zhang, to tell you the truth, I used to have similar thoughts as you, but today I know that I'm not alone." Zhang Zhishuan laughed and said, "I might as well tell you the truth. Originally, I just saw that you were able to cultivate the immortal Jinshin at such a young age, and your character is quite good. You also have a sense of propriety. I think that in time, you will definitely be another great master in our cultivation world. But I also saw that you were surrounded by powerful and beautiful monsters. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to control yourself and make a mistake. At that time, it would not only be your loss, but also the loss of our Taoist cultivation world. That's why I came here so abruptly in the middle of the night. Please don't blame me, Jinrenli." Li Yundong said with a serious face, "Jinren Zhang, I'm flattered. Please rest assured that I will definitely help you pass on your cultivation methods and lifelong experience in the future." Zhang Zhishuan nodded with appreciation. He stroked his white beard and said, "Since I left the mountain in 1993, I have accepted many disciples regardless of race, religion, faith, gender, and even nationality. But there are only 2 who can really inherit my mantle. These 2 guys have spent countless elixirs of mine, and they have endured countless days and nights of my body expansion before they barely reached the Jinshin phase. However, compared with other cultivators, they have cultivated early, so it's inevitable that they will be arrogant. If you meet them in the future, please take care of them. Li Yundong said with a smile. Don't mention it. We should take care of each other and help each other. Zhang Zhishuan pointed at Li Yundong and said with a smile. Young man, you are too steady. You speak like an old man, which doesn't sound like what people of your age should say at all. Forget it, I won't disturb you anymore. I'll go back first. Jimrenli, take care. Li Yundong thought of himself before cultivating, and how domineering he had been when he had just started cultivating. He immediately smiled with emotion and said, Jimren, I won't see you off. Zhang Zhishuan was about to turn around and leave when he suddenly turned back and looked at Li Yundong with a strange expression. He said, Jimrenli, I have something to say. I don't know if I should say it or not. Li Yundong asked curiously, What is it? Zhang Zhishuan said seriously, Jimrenli, don't you know that the female companion beside you is an extremely terrible monster? Li Yundong's heart suddenly trembled and he thought to himself, this Jimren is really powerful. Could it be that he found the mystical silver fox? No, it should be said that he found Chao Kefi's abnormality? I didn't see any clues. How did he see it? Zhang Zhishuan seemed to know what Li Yundong was thinking. He smiled slightly and said, Jimrenli, don't be surprised. I've learned physiognomy before and opened the third eye. I can tell good from evil at a glance, let alone a monster with such a strong demonic appearance. Only then did Li Yundong understand. He said, Jimren, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Zhang Zhishuan didn't want to talk too much at first, but he really appreciated Li Yundong very much. He was afraid that the young man would regret it in the future if he took a wrong step, so he couldn't help but say something. At this time, seeing that Li Yundong had understood, he naturally knew the truth, that there was no need to beat the drum. After nodding, he said with a smile, Jimrenli, take care of yourself. I'll go first. After that, his figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. Li Yundong pondered and thought. It seems that the soul of the mystical silver fox has invaded Chao Kefi's body, but why hasn't her soul awakened? Hasn't her consciousness awakened? It seems that Chao Kefi is still dominating her body. What's more, why hasn't she shown any demon chi yet? It's really strange. Li Yundong thought about it for a while, but still couldn't figure it out. He couldn't be stupid enough to rush over and ask Chao Kefi himself, so he stopped thinking about it. He opened the Vajra longevity skill and began to read it. It was amazing. Li Yundong suddenly found that the Vajra longevity skill was a treasure for ordinary people to keep in good health and prolong their lives. For a great cultivator like him, it was also a secret skill that would benefit a lot from it. Li Yundong read very fast and had a photographic memory. When dawn broke, he had already finished reading the outer 8 parts of the Vajra cultivation skill and the last volume of the inner 8 parts of the longevity skill. After reading it, he covered the book and thought deeply, as if he had understood something. In his opinion, the Vajra longevity technique could be said to be a secret and outstanding technique of his country's Taoism. The 8 parts of the Vajra technique were yang, hardness, exterior, manifestation, separation, fire, qian, body, hotian, and foundation. The longevity technique was yin, softness, interior, concealment, ridge, water, kuan, spirit, xiantian, and superior. If one practiced the Vajra longevity skill at the same time, it would be a combination of the inside and the outside, the combination of hardness and softness, the combination of qian and kuan, the combination of the innate qi, and the acquired qi of the 5 grains in water in the internal organs. If one practiced it for a long time, one could reach the realm of oneness of heaven and man and void in action. Li Yundong was also a great master who had read all the Taoist classics. Naturally, he was a person who knew what was good and what was bad, especially some places that ordinary people seemed to pass by. He chewed them over and over again, stopped to think deeply, and understood something. In particular, Li Yundong had now officially entered the realm of oneness of heaven and man. He had reached the realm of the immortal golden body, and was advancing towards the realm of the immortal golden body. And now he was a little sleepy. How could he reach the realm of the immortal golden body? But as soon as he was sleepy, someone immediately sent him a pillow. This was really a pie falling from the sky, A good thing that he didn't even dare to think about. The Vajra longevity skill that Li Yundong had read before had mentioned that the realm of the immortal golden body corresponded to oneness of heaven and man, and the realm of the immortal golden body corresponded to void in action. In Li Yundong's opinion, what was void in action? It meant that the spirit and body of a cultivator had reached a high degree of unity, and the perfect coordination between the small universe of the human body and the big universe of heaven and earth had been realized. The heaven and earth were the human body, and the human body was the heaven and earth. At this time, the spiritual energy of a cultivator had reached an incredible level. Not only could their minds and divine senses begin to challenge the power of heaven, but they could even travel in the universe. In the process of traveling in the universe and searching for the true self, the state that the cultivator's body felt was void in action. The more Li Yundong thought about it, the more excited he became. He couldn't wait to sit down cross-legged and cultivate immediately to experience the realm of void in action. But he knew that he couldn't meditate at this time, because this kind of void in action meditation could not predict when he would wake up. If there was no protector by his side, the consequences would be unimaginable. Li Yundong thought for a moment, then immediately took out his mobile phone and called Zhou Qin. After briefly explaining his situation, he put down his mobile phone and waited patiently for Zhou Qin's arrival. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door of Li Yundong's room. Li Yundong didn't even raise his head. While looking through the Vajra longevity skill, he said, "Come in, the door is open." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was pushed open, and a delicate body rushed into his arms with a burst of fragrance. A familiar and sweet voice rang in Li Yundong's ear. "Yundong, I missed you so much." Li Yundong was stunned. He took a closer look and saw that the person in his arms was none other than the little girl. He asked in surprise and joy, "Why are you here?" Su Chan raised her head with a smile and pointed behind her. "Sister Zi Yuan is here too." Li Yundong looked over and saw Zi Yuan's ethereal figure standing at the door with a smile on her face. Zhou Qin was standing next to her, slender and elegant. Li Yundong immediately laughed. "Why are you all here?" Insomnia. I woke up at 4 o'clock. I tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep, so I had to get up and write. I had a headache, so I went back to sleep. Chapter 672. Su Chan held Li Yundong's arm intimately and said with a smile, "What, you don't want to see me?" Li Yundong pinched the tip of the girl's nose with a smile and said, "Don't you need to protect Shin Kai? If all three of you come over, won't there be no one there?" Su Chan's big black eyes rolled. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer her master's words, so she turned to look at Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan for help. Soon, Li Yundong also followed her gaze and saw that Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan were looking at each other. They seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought, as if they had something to say. Li Yundong smiled and said, "What are you standing at the door for? Come in. If someone sees you, they will think that I'm looking for a miss in the middle of the night." Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin had been worried about Xin Yu and didn't know how to tell Li Yundong about it. They were a little nervous and worried, but at this time, Li Yundong's joke immediately drove away the worries in their hearts. Zi Yuan glared at Li Yundong angrily and said in a low voice, "What miss? Do we look like a miss?" Zhou Qin chuckled and said, "If we were a miss, how much should we charge you for coming in?" Li Yundong hadn't expected that the two of them would actually play along with his joke. He laughed and waved his hand, saying, "There are peerless beauties who live in seclusion in an empty valley. One smile can topple a city, and 2 smiles can topple a country. I can't afford to pay for you 2 fairies in the world." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? If Du Fu, the sage of poetry, knew that you had changed his poems like this, I'm afraid he would be so angry that he would jump out of his coffin." Su Chan pulled Li Yundong's arm and joined in the fun with a smile. She tapped her nose and whispered in his ear, "Hey, master, I won't take your money." Li Yundong looked at Su Chan in surprise. "Did I say I would give you money? You really think too highly of yourself." Su Chan's face suddenly became long, and she looked resentful. You're so annoying. Am I worthless? Li Yundong said seriously with a straight face. Of course my girl is worthless. She's a priceless treasure. At first, Su Chan pouted, but when she heard the last sentence, she suddenly smiled and giggled. Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan saw the couple flirting, as if there was no one else around. They looked at each other and couldn't help thinking. If Shen Yu succeeds, what will happen to Li Yundong? Such a consequence made the two of them shudder at the thought of it. For a moment, they didn't know how to talk to Li Yundong. After a while, Zi Yuan whispered to Li Yundong, Li Yundong, don't worry. Nothing will happen to Chen Wankai. Li Yunyang patted the little girl's head and motioned for her to sit aside. He sat up himself and said to Zi Yuan, Of course I know. I can rest assured when you do things. You won't do things that make me worry like Chan'er. I'll be there soon, you're so annoying, Su Chan said angrily. I know what I'm doing now, and I'm trying very hard not to cause trouble for you. Li Yundong laughed and said, Yes, thanks to you, I'm still alive and well. I really should thank you properly. Immortal Su Chan. Su Chan shouted and pounced on Li Yundong, pinching and biting him. She said angrily, I'm so angry. You don't even have a good word to say when you see me. You despise me, don't you? Li Yundong. And the little girl laughed for a while. Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan felt even more afraid and guilty when they saw that the two of them were glued to each other. Zhou Qin coughed dryly and said, Master, in fact, we came together this time because there are a few things we want to tell you. Li Yundong smiled and said, Of course I know. Something must have happened. That's why the three of you came together. Zhou Qin's expression was a little unnatural, and her usual sharp tongue had long disappeared. She hesitated and told him what had happened in Shenjiasheng, then said in a low voice, Master, it's my fault. If I had been vigilant enough, Su Chan wouldn't have been in such danger. At first, Li Yundong listened to Zhou Qin with a smile, but slowly, the smile on his face gradually disappeared, replaced by a cold face and cold eyes. Unlike what Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan had imagined, Li Yundong did not fly into a rage like an angry beast. Instead, he chose to remain silent. At this time, the youngest great cultivator in the cultivation world already had his own majesty and bearing. When he was not smiling, just sitting there, his broad shoulders and strong back were like towering mountains. The pressure was amazing, and his momentum was so strong that it was suffocating. Others did not dare to take a breath at all. It could be said that Zhou Qin and Zi Yuan had watched Li Yundong grow from a domineering and cheerful little boy to what he was today. Little by little, he had evolved into the Li Yundong that he was today. However, the longer they got along with him, the more they respected him. This kind of respect came from Li Yundong's brave and diligent cultivation, as well as his open and honest character and temperament. They didn't know when it had started, but in their hearts, Li Yundong was no longer a young and inexperienced little boy, but a great man who could carry the sky on his shoulders. Zhou Qin, who was not afraid of anything, looked at Li Yundong timidly. The abnormal behavior of the man she deeply loved in front of her made her a little nervous. She tentatively wanted to say something, but soon Li Yundong raised his hand and stopped her. He said in a deep voice, Where is Shen Yu? Where is he? As soon as Li Yunyang spoke, both Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin breathed a sigh of relief. Zi Yuan took over the conversation and said, Zhou Qin also went to look for Shen Yu's whereabouts before, but he suddenly disappeared. Zhou Qin tracked him to the place where the blood disappeared, and then disappeared. Li Yundong's face became even more gloomy. He said coldly, Zhou Qin, I don't care what method you use, find him. Zhou Qin nodded hard, gritted her teeth and said, Don't worry, I also want to kill this scumbag with my own hands. But soon, she had an idea and said tentatively, Master, do you think it's possible that someone from the Shen family secretly took Shen Yu away? Was it just a ruse before? Zi Yuan was shocked and immediately glanced at Zhou Qin calmly, but Zhou Qin didn't seem to notice it at all. She was still staring at Li Yundong. Zi Yuan knew that Zhou Qin could be said to be a person who didn't distinguish between good and evil. Her only value judgment was that she would believe whatever Li Yundong said. Whatever Li Yundong said, even if there was a volcanic cliff in front of her, she would still jump. Zhou Qin's words were equivalent to testing Li Yundong's mind. If Li Yundong had the intention of taking revenge on the Shun family, she would turn around and do it. Ziyuan saw Li Yundong glancing at Zhou Qin with a gloomy gaze. His expressionless face made her heart tremble. Ziyuan quickly tried to persuade him in a low voice. Li Yundong, I know you are very angry, but you have to calm down. Don't hate the house and its crow. This matter is only Shen Yu's fault. Don't implicate Shen Wankai. After a moment of silence, Li Yundong said slowly, Ziyuan, don't worry. I'm not a cruel and bloodthirsty person. To be fair, Shen Wankai has handled this matter very fairly, and I can't pick on him. But the reason why I insist that Zhou Qin find Shen Yu is not for anything else, but that I have to let the world know that if someone wants to hurt the people around me, I have to make them pay the price with my own hands. If others insult me, bully me, curse me, or hate me, I will just treat it as a fleeting cloud and wave my hand. As he said this, Li Yundong's eyes narrowed, and he said with a murderous look, but if someone dares to touch a hair on the people around me, I will definitely kill them. Otherwise, if this kind of thing happens once, there will be a second time, and then there will be a third time. In the future, if these things happen to you, what do you want me to do? Zhou Qin's expression changed when she heard this, and her heart couldn't help pounding. She thought, the people around me that master mentioned, are they also including me? Ziyuan's heart also skipped a beat, but she quickly covered up her momentary loss of composure by touching her ear. After calming down, she smiled slightly and said, as the saying goes, Bodhisattva's heart can be shown with thunderous means. What you said is also very reasonable. However, I don't know where Shen Yu is now. Where should we start to find him? I believe that Shen Wankai will not be stupid enough to protect his son, Li Yundong said in a deep voice. Shen Wankai is a decisive and ambitious person. This kind of person. If we can't make friends with him, we must make sure that we can't become enemies. If we become enemies, we must make sure that we destroy this kind of enemy as soon as possible. Otherwise, there will be endless troubles in the future. Zhou Qin said softly, Master, I think you can really consider taking Shen Wankai for your own use. No matter how you look at it, if he is on our side, he will be a great help to us. Li Yundong didn't comment. After he was silent for a while, Su Chan, who had been silent all this time, carefully pulled on Li Yundong's sleeve. She leaned over and whispered in Li Yundong's ear, Master, don't be angry. I'm fine, aren't I? I'll be careful in the future. I won't eat anything that's not cooked for me. In this way, nothing will happen. Okay. Li Yundong's gloomy face finally broke into a smile. Hey, are you hinting that I should cook for you for the rest of my life? Su Chan smiled so widely that her eyes narrowed into a line. Okay. I like the food cooked by Yundong the most. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He pinched the flesh on the girl's cheek and said, You winking, you make me less worried? Su Chan held Li Yundong's arm tightly. She rested her chin on Li Yundong's shoulder and whispered, I know. I will be very careful in the future. I don't want to see you angry either. You were so scary just now. I was so scared that I didn't dare to breathe. Li Yundong tilted his head and looked at her. He said with a smile, Are you afraid to see me angry? Do you dislike me? Su Chan giggled and held Li Yundong's arm tighter and tighter. No, although I was a little scared of you just now, I'm very happy to see you so worried about me. Hee, no matter what you become, I won't dislike you. Li Yundong's heart was filled with warmth. He looked at Su Chan and smiled gently. Yes, no matter what you become, I will never turn my back on you. This is what we agreed on. The two of them were intimate for a while, as if there was no one else around. Li Yundong heard Zhou Qin cough next to him. Only then did he remember that there were two spectators next to him. He turned around and smiled apologetically, saying, I'm sorry to have made you watch a joke again. By the way, Ziyuan, you came at the right time. Come and have a look at this. As he said this, Li Yundong pushed the Vajra longevity skill he had read to Ziyuan. When Ziyuan had seen Li Yundong and Su Chan being intimate before, Her heart had been sour and strange. An indescribable strange feeling lingered in her heart, making her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, when she heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately stepped forward and diverted her attention. Ziyuan only took a glance and suddenly widened her eyes. Is this Master Zhang Jishuan's Vajra longevity skill? Li Yundong laughed. I knew you knew who Zhang Jishuan was. You really know all the sects in the cultivation world like the back of your hand. Ziyuan looked at Li Yundong in surprise. You don't know Master Zhang Jishuan? Li Yundong laughed dryly. You know, I've only been cultivating for half a year. How could I know so many cultivators? If I hadn't met him yesterday, I wouldn't have known that there was such a person in this world. Ziyuan shook her head in disbelief. Master Zhang Jishuan is one of the few old elders in the cultivation world of our Hua Taoist family. He is also a great cultivator recognized by the state. He used to be the people's representative of Baoji County in Shaanxi Province, the president of the National Taoist Association, the president of the Five Thunder Mountain Taoist Association in Hunan Province, and the executive director of the National Taoist Association. Zhou Qin was born in the officialdom, so she was particularly sensitive to these things. She widened her eyes and said, This person has a great background. Ziyuan said with a serious face. Not only does he have a strong background, but after he settled in Ding'an County, Hainan, he promoted his Vajra longevity kung fu in the county, which set off a national health craze. Moreover, Ding'an County has been influenced by Zhang Jishuan for decades. The rate of centenarians in the county is far higher than the national average, and it is 22 times higher than the data standard of the United Nations for longevity. Su Chan exclaimed, Wow, that's amazing! How come I've never heard of such a great cultivator before? Li Yundong sighed and shook his head. Because he doesn't pursue fame and fortune at all, so he's not famous. Zhenren Zhang has blessed the world, and doesn't cherish his treasures because of the sect's opinion. I'm not as good as him. Ziyuan looked at Li Yundong strangely. Why did Master Zhang Jishuan pass on his Vajra longevity skill to you? Although Master Zhang Jishuan has never cherished his treasures, and the Vajra longevity skill has been passed on to many disciples, this is the first time I've heard of him giving a book version of the Vajra longevity skill to others. You should know that this is a top cultivation method that can only be passed on to outsiders. When Li Yundong heard this, his respect for Master Zhang Jishuan increased by another level. He told them about his encounter with Zhang Jishuan with emotion, and then said, The reason why I called you here is that I was afraid that something would happen to me when I was wandering in the sky. At that time, no one would protect Chao Kefi, and no one would protect me. That's why I asked you to come. Since you're here now, you might as well leave one of you to guard me. I've long wanted to try this realm of wandering in the sky and doing nothing in the void. For a cultivator, getting a precious cultivation method was no different from getting a drug addict. Ziyuan, Su Chan, and Zhou Qin naturally understood Li Yundong's current itch. Ziyuan smiled and said, It's okay. We're here. You can rest assured and meditate. Leave it to us. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Well, since you're all here, what else do I have to worry about? As he spoke, Li Yundong turned his head and nodded to Zhou Qin. Then he smiled at Su Chan and sat down cross-legged on the spot. Soon, he entered an extremely deep meditation. However, not long after Li Yundong entered meditation, Su Chan suddenly let out a cry and exclaimed in a low voice, Oh, what if Yundong's mind is wandering and he forgets to come back? Ziyuan chuckled and said, No, although it's dangerous for the primordial spirit to travel, with Li Yundong's willpower and strength, he will definitely be able to avoid danger. It's just a matter of time before he wakes up. Su Chan looked at her eagerly and said, Yes, but what if? When the ceremony of your Linggong sect begins in 10 days, Yundong still hasn't woken up? What should we do? What if Yundong hadn't woken up by the time the Japanese came over? What if the mystical silver fox really appears at that time, and Yundong still hasn't woken up? Su Chan asked 3 questions in a row, which immediately made Ziyuan and Zhou Qin, 2 women who were usually calm and had a lot of ideas, dumbfounded. The three of them looked at each other and thought in unison, "Yes, what should we do if all of this comes together?" Chapter 673. Su Chan's words made Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin speechless. When they came to their senses, they smiled bitterly together. Zi Yuan sighed softly and said, "There's nothing we can do about it. When my master used to be in meditation, sometimes he would wake up in a day or two, and sometimes he wouldn't wake up for a month or two. He didn't eat or drink at all, as if he was in hibernation." Zhou Qin asked in confusion, "Can't you wake him up? Just like the last time my master was lost in the spirit space, you went into the spirit space and brought him out?" Zi Yuan shook her head and said, "No, the spirit space is different from the spirit space. No matter how big the spirit space is, there is still a limit. The 3,000 small worlds in the burning thumb pot can be found one by one. But it will take a lot of time. However, the spirit space is equivalent to placing a person's yang spirit energy in the vast universe. At this time, a person is inconceivably small, and the universe is vast and boundless. Not only is it easy for cultivators to get lost, even if I want to find Li Yundong's yang spirit, I can't start, because I don't know which corner of the universe his yang spirit will fly to." Zhou Qin couldn't help but be shocked. "Then if we forcibly wake him up, it's useless?" Zi Yuan sighed and said, "If we forcibly wake him up, it's very likely that he will be possessed by the devil. In the past, when my master was in a trance state, it was Marshal Uncle Yin Fong who stood guard by his side. Sometimes it was only a day or two, but sometimes it was as long as a month or two, and Shibui Yin Fong had to guard him for a month or two." As she spoke, Zi Yuan said to Zhou Qin, "By the way, you should have heard of a poem. It's called, 'Under the Pine Tree, I asked the boy,' saying that master had gone to pick herbs, only in this mountain deep in the clouds." Zhou Qin laughed and said, "Of course I know this poem, but Zi Yuan you." Zhou Qin was also a very smart person. She quickly came to a realization and said, "You mean, master is now in this kind of situation of only in this mountain, deep in the clouds?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Yes, Li Yundong has now reached the level of the Jinshin phase. His small universe, and the universe of heaven and earth, have begun to slowly understand each other and integrate with each other. This process is the process of picking herbs. We all know that he now exists in this universe, but we don't know where he is. Therefore, this poem is actually a kind of cultivation poem that hints at the realm of cultivation." Zhou Qin sighed with emotion and said, "No wonder Taoism has declined so much. When I read the Taoist classics before, my biggest feeling was that all kinds of Taoist cultivation classics were really mysterious and illusory. The worst thing was that the great cultivators in the past liked to use all kinds of metaphors to describe their cultivation methods. As a result, if future people followed the ancient books to cultivate according to the pictures, it was easy for them to go astray because of misunderstanding and become possessed by the devil. Unless there was a famous teacher to guide them, they might not be able to find the great way and cultivate the real method in their lifetime. Alas, I didn't expect this well-known poem to be a poem about cultivation." Zi Yuan chuckled. "Jia Dao used to be a monk, so he can be considered half a cultivator. As for when Li Yundong will wake up from his meditation this time, it will depend on his luck. Now that the situation is so urgent, I think he also can't wait to improve his cultivation method, so he chose to meditate at this time." Zhou Qin asked, "What if the Linggong sect holds a succession ceremony at this time?" There was a flash of sadness in Zi Yuan's eyes, but she quickly smiled and said, "The sect leader is just an illusory cloud. It doesn't matter if you miss it." Su Chan, who had been listening to their discussion about cultivation, suddenly said, "Sister Zi Yuan, Sister Zhou Qin, why don't I take care of Yundong? And you two go take care of President Chao." Zhou Qin immediately shook her head and said, "Su Chan, I'll take care of Master. You and Zi Yuan will take care of President Chao." However, Zi Yuan clapped the Vajra longevity skill in her hands and said, With such a precious treasure in front of us, don't you want to learn and practice it? Su Chan blinked and said, wasn't this passed on to Yundong by Master Zhang Jishuan? Can we practice it? Zi Yuan smiled and said, since Master Zhang Jishuan passed the classics to Li Yundong in written form, it means that he is not afraid of the Vajra longevity skill being spread out. On the contrary, I think Master Zhang Jishuan also wants to spread this set of cultivation methods to the world. We mustn't let him down. He doesn't just give a set of ancient books to everyone he meets. This kind of opportunity doesn't come by all the time. Zhou Qin took the Vajra longevity skill from Zi Yuan. At first she looked through it casually, but the more she looked at it, the more excited she became. After reading for a while, she suddenly closed the book, gritted her teeth and said, no, I can't read it anymore. If I read it again, I also want to meditate. Zi Yuan chuckled and said, how about this? One of us will take turns staying here to practice cultivation methods while guarding Li Yundong. The other two will be responsible for taking care of Chao Kefi. What do you think? Su Chan clapped her hands and laughed. Good, that's a good idea. I'll take care of her for the first day. Just as Zi Yuan was about to speak, someone suddenly knocked on the door. Zhou Qin turned her head and shouted, come in, the door is not locked. After a while, the door was gently pushed open, and half of a beautiful girl's body poked through the door. She said weakly, Li Yundong. Isn't he in this room? Zi Yuan took a look and saw that this girl was Lu Feier, the big star who had come with Yin Mengfan to congratulate the opening day of Desanxian. She smiled slightly and said, Li Yundong lives here. What can I do for you? Lu Feier looked at Zi Yuan with a face full of curiosity and muttered in her heart, it's really strange. I should be the one asking you this, right? Why did you suddenly come here so early in the morning? Did you spend the night here? TSK, this immortal Li is very romantic. However, she also knew that Li Yundong's relationship with them was far more distant than hers, so she smiled politely and said, our crew is already downstairs. It's about to go out. I came to ask if Li Yundong has gotten up. Didn't he say that he would go with us? Zi Yuan laughed. She turned her head and said to Su Chan, Su Chan, you stay here and guard Li Yundong. I'll go with Zhou Qin first. Su Chan nodded obediently and giggled. Then I'll go take a shower first. After that, she tied her head up and rushed into the bathroom excitedly. Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin looked at each other and nodded. They walked to the door, and Zhou Qin smiled politely and reservedly at Lu Feier. Miss Lu Feier, let's go. My master told me to take care of you. Lu Feier had seen that Zhao Yuzhen had been scared away by Li Yundong before. She had expected that Zhao Yuzhen would not appear in front of them again in a short period of time. Therefore, she had run up early this morning purely to find this mysterious, immortal Li, out of admiration. She wanted to spend more time with him. But who would have thought that she would see 3 stunning beauties in Li Yundong's room early in the morning, and each of them was as beautiful as her own. This really made Lu Feier feel very depressed. Although Lu Feier was unhappy, she was well cultivated. She didn't show it on her face at all. She smiled politely and brightly and said, well, welcome to our crew. As she said this, she led the 2 of them downstairs. Zi Yuan was relatively cold when dealing with people. When she met people from the secular world, she would not speak if she could. If it weren't for Li Yundong, she would not have set foot in the mortal world at all. Zhou Qin, on the other hand, used to be a maverick girl from a noble family. When she was enthusiastic, she was as hot as fire. And when she was indifferent, she was as cold as ice. Especially after cultivating, her temperament had become like a winter plum in the snow. At first, Lu Feier would talk to the 2 of them from time to time, trying to find something to talk about. But Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin were very cold when they met strangers. Although the 2 of them smiled politely every time they spoke and answered politely, from their eyebrows and temperament, there was a kind of otherworldly aura that was superior to all living beings. Slowly, Lu Feier felt very bored as she spoke. She turned her face away in disappointment and stopped talking to Zi Yuan and Zhou Qin. She thought to herself, you're so annoying. What is Immortal Li doing? It's so boring to face these two icy beauties. After they went down to the entrance of the hotel, Lu Feier saw Chow Kefi waiting at the door. She suddenly seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, and quickly ran toward Chow Kefi, saying, I don't know what your little enemy is doing. He found two beautiful women to be his stand-in. Look, they are all acquaintances. You've seen them before. Chow Kefi looked over and was shocked. She quickly glared at Lu Feier and said, What little enemy? How can you say such things? Nonsense. She hurried over to Zhou Qin and shook hands with her with a smile. It turns out that the eldest daughter of the Zhou family has arrived. Sorry for not going out to meet you. As she said this, she nodded politely to Zi Yuan and smiled. Zhou Qin smiled and shook hands with Chow Kefi, but she stared at Chow Kefi carefully for a while without saying anything. Chow Kefi touched her cheek in confusion. Is there anything on my face? Zhou Qin came to her senses and smiled. It's nothing. I'm a little too happy to see you again, President Chow. However, President Chow, I haven't seen you for a while, and you've become more beautiful. Chow Kefi covered her mouth and laughed. Really? Well, even if what you said is true, I'm really flattered to be praised by the eldest daughter of the Zhou family. Get in the car. It's about to leave. Zhou Qin smiled and let Chow Kefi and Lu Feier get in the car first. Then she turned to look at Zi Yuan in confusion and said in a low voice, Hasn't the mystical silver fox been possessed yet? Zi Yuan looked serious. Under the cover of her body, she quickly took out the glass mirror of heaven from her sleeve and touched the surface of the mirror with her hand. Then, Chow Kefi's figure quickly appeared on the surface of the mirror. Her figure was faintly floating with a few balls of light of different colors. After glancing at it, Zi Yuan quickly wiped her hand again and erased the picture on the mirror. Then she hit the glass mirror of heaven. She said in a deep voice, As I expected, the mystical silver fox has already been possessed. Now Chow Kefi has 2 souls and 4 spirits. In the past, she only had 1 soul and 2 spirits. Zhou Qin was shocked. Ah, how did you know? Why can't I see it? Did you see it with the glass mirror of heaven? Zi Yuan said in a low voice, Every sect has some secrets. I heard that the secret of the Chuanjin dragon sect is the emperor's physiognomy. They can infer a person's fate through the skill of physiognomy. And the secret of the Zhengyi school is the qi gazing technique. Whether it's the heaven qi, earth qi, mountain qi, water qi, human qi, dragon qi, 5 elements qi, or wealth qi, the great cultivators of the Zhengyi school can see through them at a glance. That's why Master Zhang of the Zhengyi school chose Mount Longhu, the best cultivation place in the world. Zhou Qin asked curiously, What about your Linggong sect? Zi Yuan smiled proudly and said, Our Linggong sect is good at the secret method of sound transmission and the art of identifying souls. In fact, this is also a disguised derivation of the qi-gazing technique of the Zhengyi school, because the stronger a person's soul is, the stronger his aura will be, and the more prosperous the aura that can be reflected will be. At that time, Chow Kefi's aura was incredibly weak, so I deduced that her soul might be incomplete. Later, after secretly testing with the glass mirror of heaven, I confirmed this. Zhou Qin said, But, if the mystical silver fox has already possessed Chow Kefi, why didn't she show it at all just now? Could it be that the mystical silver fox was born to be so good at acting? It's impossible, isn't it? Everyone can't be like Yan Fang, can they? Zi Yuan shook her head and said, I don't know. Maybe. The divine sense and memory of the mystical silver fox haven't awakened yet? Zhou Qin was stunned. What will happen if it awakens? What about Chow Kefi's divine sense and memory? Or, what will happen to Chow Kefi? Zi Yuan's face darkened slightly. It's very simple. There can't be 2 tigers on one mountain. Once the divine sense and memory of the mystical silver fox wake up, Chow Kefi's divine sense and memory will be mercilessly erased. The mystical silver fox is definitely not a soft-hearted person. Besides, if it were you, after being sealed for more than 1,000 years, would you politely give up the body of your remnant soul when you suddenly wake up? Zhou Qin's face darkened slightly. She said with a worried look, Oh no. If the mystical silver fox just wants to seize Chow Kefi's body, Then we can help Chow Kefi's memory and divine sense rebuild her body. But if she wants to erase Chow Kefi's memory and divine sense, isn't that too much? If Master knew about it, he would never agree. Ziyuan naturally knew what kind of person Li Yundong was. She looked worriedly at Chow Kefi, who was talking happily with the rest of the crew in the car, and said in a low voice, "Yes. If Li Yundong finds out, what will he do? In addition, I'll make a friendly advertisement and recommend a book of my friend, ttp://one blood evil heavenly demon. 10 years to build the foundation, 100 years to refine pills, and 1,000 years to ascend. Why? Is it to break the shackles of fate, or just to live forever?" Chapter 674. While Ziyuan and Zhou Qin were worried, Ruan Hongling and the little foxes were carefree at home in Tianan City. Early in the morning, Ruan Hongling got up early. She was yawning as she walked out of the room, and was about to go to the bathroom, when she saw several little foxes sitting in the living room. Their faces were full of interest as they watched the soap opera with relish. Ruan Hongling had been with these little foxes for a long time, and she knew that they were no different from ordinary little girls. They were even more innocent, and had no idea of the dangers of the world. At this time, Ao Wushuang was not there. Before leaving, Ziyuan had specifically asked Ruan Hongling to help take care of the Fox Zen school. Ruan Hongling had been taken care of since she was a child, so how could she be willing to take care of others? But even so, she had no choice but to take on the responsibility, because the entire Fox Zen school was almost empty now. Although Chao Yi and Lu Yuehong were also considered seniors of the Fox Zen school, when it came to fighting, Ruan Hongling, who had the immortal red silk handkerchief in her hand, had extraordinary combat power. Even if Chao Yi and Lu Yuehong joined forces, they might not necessarily be Ruan Hongling's match. Ruan Hongling walked to the living room and looked at the little foxes sitting on the sofa. Seeing that there were only 5 of them, she asked, "Where are the other 2? One of the little foxes didn't even raise her head. She pointed to the bathroom behind her and said, "They're inside." Ruan Hongling nodded and walked to the bathroom. Just as she was about to push the door open and go in, she heard Ling Yu's clear voice coming from inside. She said angrily, "Hey, stop touching. You've touched the top and the bottom, and all the hair has fallen off. Such a tender skin has been touched by you. What do you want me to do?" When Ruan Hongling heard this, she suddenly became alert, and her drowsiness disappeared without a trace. She suddenly opened her eyes wide and thought to herself, "No way, what is Ling Yu doing in there? Could it be that as soon as Li Yundong left and Shiji left, she? Even though Ruan Hongling had a fiery disposition and abhorred evil, she was still a virgin girl after all. When she thought of something shameful, she was simply unable to restrain the embarrassment, and her face blushed from the tip of her ears to the tip of her neck, causing her heart to be filled with both anger and rage. What a scandal! It was still early in the morning, and he was doing it here. Ruan Hongling was furious. She pushed open the door of the bathroom and rushed in. She shouted, "Bastards, if you want to be slutty, why don't you find a place? Why are you here?" But before she could finish her words, she saw Ling Yu and a little fox standing in front of the sink. There was a pool of peaches in the sink, and the little fox was holding a tender peach in her hand. A layer of skin had been rubbed off, and the crystal clear juice was flowing out. She tilted her head and looked at herself in shock. Ling Yu looked at Ruan Hongling in confusion and asked, "Sister Hongling, what's wrong with you? Why are you so excited? What are you talking about?" Ruan Hongling's eyes widened. Her eyes scanned the bathroom like a radar, but she saw that the doors and windows were tightly shut. Apart from Ling Yu and the little fox, there was no one else inside. Ruan Hongling's heart skipped a beat and she thought to herself, "Oh no, did I make a mistake?" Ruan Hongling was extremely embarrassed. She stammered and said, "What were you talking about just now?" Ling Yu and the little fox were both shrewd and quickly reacted. They didn't reply. After they looked at each other, they began to laugh ambiguously. Their laughter was very sneaky, and it was very hateful. Wan Hongling was so angry that she glared at them. She bit the bullet and said, "I'm asking you, what were you talking about just now? What do you mean by touching the top and bottom? What do you mean by losing hair and running water? How can you say such vulgar words?" Ling Yu and the little fox couldn't help but burst into laughter. They laughed so hard that they swayed back and forth. Ling Yu picked up a peach from the sink and said with a smile, "That's right. I touched the top and bottom of this peach. If I touch it too much, won't it lose hair and run water?" After that, the two of them couldn't help but laugh again. The laughter of Ling Yu and the little fox made Wan Hongling want to find a crack in the ground and hide in it. She was so embarrassed that her face and neck turned red. She stamped her feet and rushed out. Without saying a word, she rushed into her room and burrowed into the quilt like an ostrich. She covered her burning cheeks and pounded on the bed angrily. Damn it, these two girls must have done it on purpose. They're too hateful. After a while, Wan Hongling heard another burst of laughter coming from outside the door. It was obvious that Ling Yu had told the other little foxes what had happened just now, making them laugh. Wan Hongling was so angry that tears were about to fall from her eyes. She had never suffered such humiliation before. "Bastards, bastards, a bunch of bastards." Wan Hongling gritted her teeth and cursed in a low voice. But just as she was getting angry out of shame, she suddenly heard a shout from outside the door. "Sister Hongling." Wan Hongling was so ashamed and angry that she didn't want to answer them. She stuffed her ears with a pillow and said in a low voice, "I don't want to hear it. I can't hear it. I can't hear it." Although the little fox's kung fu was not good, they were, after all, little spirits. It didn't take long for their shouts to not weaken. Instead, they became clearer and clearer in Wan Hongling's ears. Wan Hongling was furious. She suddenly sat up from the bed and roared, "What are you shouting for? Wake up!" Wan Hongling's loud shout made the little fox's shouts disappear. After a long time, Ling Yu's voice came in from the door weakly. "Sister Hongling, someone is looking for you." Wan Hongling thought of her previous embarrassing situation and said angrily, "Who's looking for me? Who would be looking for me at this time? I won't see anyone. Get out of here." As soon as Wan Hongling's voice fell, she heard a low and angry snort. "Humph, how domineering and powerful. Sure enough, you've been with evildoers for too long. Even your temper has grown." As soon as Wan Hongling heard this voice, she immediately sat up from the bed and rushed out of the door like a gust of wind. As soon as she opened the door, she saw the little fox in the living room looking at the door, as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Ling Yu also grabbed her arm and whispered, "It's someone from the Jingyi school." Wan Hongling's heart trembled. She took a deep breath and looked at the door, only to see Zhou Ping of the Jingyi school standing there, holding a golden invitation in her hands, and looking at her with a sneer. When Zhou Ping saw Wan Hongling coming out, she sneered, then turned around and left. Wan Hongling shouted, "Stop! What are you doing here?" Zhou Ping sneered and said, "Jinren Wan, didn't you want to drive people away just now? Although I, Zhou Ping, am not a great person, I'm not a shameless person who won't leave even if others drive me away." After that, she stepped out of the door. Wan Hongling was shocked and uncertain, especially when she saw the golden invitation in Zhou Ping's hand and the fearless look on her face. She couldn't help but shout again, "Wait, what are you doing here? What's that in your hand?" Zhou Ping stopped, turned her head and sneered, "Do you care? Since you care, why did you drive me away indiscriminately just now?" Wan Hongling was unwilling to talk about what had happened before, but she was also shy and couldn't bring herself to apologize. So she stiffened her neck and said, "You can't leave. You can't leave until you've made things clear." Zhou Ping laughed and said, "What? Do you think you can make me stay?" Wan Hongling was stunned when she heard this. Although she had the immortal cloud-red caltrip handkerchief in her hand, Zhou Ping was not easy to deal with. If the two of them fought, winning or losing was a small matter. But if the two sects officially broke up, or even went against each other, it would be very bad. Especially when the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect was imminent. If something happened at this time, it would be really giving others a handle. Wan Hongling was so angry that she couldn't say anything. Chao Yi and Lu Yuehong had already come out when they heard the noise. The petite and beautiful Lu Yuehong glanced at Zhou Ping and said rudely, "If she's not enough, what about me?" Zhou Ping's eyes flashed with anger and she shouted, "Do you want to win by numbers?" Chao Yi snorted coldly, "Win by numbers? This is the proud kung fu of the righteous sections. Wasn't it the same when you besieged our Fox Zen school?" Zhou Ping said angrily, "This is the grievance of our Jingyi school. It has nothing to do with the evildoers of your Fox Zen school. If you know what's good for you, leave quickly." When the little foxes of the Fox Zen school heard her call them evildoers, even a clay figurine would get angry. What's more, the two sects had already formed a lot of enmity before. The little foxes suddenly became furious and cursed. "You're the evildoer. You kill people indiscriminately. If you're not an evildoer, what are you? You're a bad person. Get out. You're not welcome here. Shiji Lingyu. You shouldn't have opened the door for such a person." However, Wan Hongling had heard Zhou Ping's previous words. She suddenly had an idea and raised her hand, motioning for the little foxes to quiet down. She asked, "You said that this is a matter of our Jingyi school? Are you here today? Is it because of the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect?" Zhou Ping sneered and said, "You're smart." Wan Hongling's expression changed. She stretched out her hand and shouted, "Give me the golden invitation." Zhou Ping sneered, "Do you think you're invincible, Li? You want me to obediently hand it over with just a few words? Let me tell you, if you don't apologize today, don't even think about getting this golden invitation. If you have the ability, come and grab it." Wan Hongling was so angry that her face turned pale. Ling Yu looked at Wan Hongling apologetically and said softly, "Sister Hongling, I'm sorry. If it weren't for us." Wan Hongling immediately interrupted her and said in a low voice, "It has nothing to do with you. The Jingyi school has always liked to make trouble for us." Wan Hongling took a deep breath and repeated in her heart, as if she were hypnotizing herself, "A little impatience will spoil a great plan. And a little impatience will spoil a great plan." She calmed herself down, gritted her teeth and said, "Jinren Zhou, I'm really sorry for offending you just now. Please give me the golden invitation for the sake of us both being disciples of the Jingyi school." When the little foxes saw Wan Hongling lowering her head and apologizing, they immediately clamored, "Don't apologize. If you don't want the golden invitation, then don't. What's the big deal?" Zhou Ping laughed and said, "It's not a big deal. It's just that without this golden invitation, you won't even be qualified to attend the ceremony of the Linggong sect. Moreover, I, Zhou Ping, traveled thousands of miles to deliver the golden invitation, but I was scolded and sent out." If this news gets out, how will all the cultivators in the world view your Linggong sect? Your Shiji Zi Yuan still wants to be the next leader? Bah! Stop dreaming. Ling Yu jumped up and said angrily, "It was just a misunderstanding. Sister Hongling was just joking with us." "Who told you that? Don't think too highly of yourself." Zhou Ping was furious. "Is it your turn to speak here?" As she said this, she turned her head and glared at Wan Hongling. "Wan Hongling, are you determined to give up? Hurry up and take the golden invitation according to etiquette." Wan Hongling felt extremely wronged and angry. She forced a smile, bent down, raised her hands and said respectfully, "Please give me the invitation." Zhou Ping snorted coldly and glanced at Wan Hongling. "That's more like it. Here, take it." After handing the golden invitation to Wan Hongling, she glanced coldly at the other people of the Fox Zen school, smiled coldly, and turned her head to leave. After she left, Wan Hongling straightened up and stared at the golden invitation in her hand. For a moment, she thought of how she and her Shiji had been living alone all these years. They had been guarding the Linggong sect, which was declining day by day, and had suffered the harassment and contempt of some people of the Jingyi school. Especially last time, Zhang Ling and the others of the Jingyi school had ransacked the cave of the Linggong sect in front of her, and even the souls of Yu Jiao and Zhuang Rong had been taken away. Such a great humiliation was really unforgettable. Thinking of this, for a moment, Wan Hongling felt sad. Her tears fell, splashing on the golden invitation drop by drop. The crystal tears rolled on the gilded invitation and fell to the ground. The little foxes on the side couldn't help but think of their own sex when they saw this. They felt the same way and began to cry. Ling Yu comforted Ruan Hongling in a low voice. Sister Hongling, don't cry. When the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect comes, we will definitely ask our leader to stand up for you. The other little foxes also said in unison, Yes, we support you, Sister Hongling. Lu Yuehong and Chao Yi also said resolutely, The Jingyi school has gone too far. Hongling, don't worry. We will definitely help you and Jimren Zi Yuan. Ruan Hongling wiped her tears and forced a smile. It's okay. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about us. Come on, let's watch TV. Ruan Hongling quickly wiped her face, sat down on the sofa, and said to the little foxes with a forced smile, Let's not talk about these unhappy things. Let's watch TV. As she said this, she pressed the remote control and changed the channel while asking, What do you want to watch? Although the little foxes were heartless, they still knew what was going on. They said one after another, Sister Hongling, we'll watch whatever you want to watch. Ruan Hongling's heart was in a mess. There was nothing she wanted to watch, so she changed the channel aimlessly. The other little foxes also followed her thoughts and watched her change the channel. When they saw something they wanted to watch, they opened their mouths but swallowed back their words. But suddenly, Ling Yu grabbed Ruan Hongling's arm and said, Hey, Sister Hongling, turn back the channel. I seem to have seen a piece of news. Ruan Hongling was shocked. She came to her senses and rewound 2 channels. Suddenly, she saw a group of Japanese people worshipping and burning incense at the Cold Mountain Temple on the TV screen. This group of Japanese people was holding many banners and flags, and one of them was the most conspicuous, which read, The Pioneer Group of the Friendly Exchange of the Japanese Cultivation World. After what had happened at the last Taoist assembly, Ruan Hongling had become a lot more vigilant about the cultivators of the Japanese cultivation world. When she saw this scene, she was suddenly stunned. She thought to herself, There are many traditions of communication in the Japanese Buddhist world, but many of these people are wearing the clothes of Shintoism, and some are even wearing the clothes of yin-yang masters. They are not Buddhist cultivators. How can they have a friendly exchange? Not only was she confused, but the little foxes also looked at each other in dismay. Ling Yu laughed and said, Last time at the Taoist assembly, there were 3 Japanese people, one old, one young, and one young. This time they came as a group? Do they think they are playing a large-scale game? Ling Yu had been involved in the mortal world for a long time, and she knew more about fashionable things than ordinary people. Her casual words immediately made the other little foxes giggle. It doesn't matter how many people come. The sect leader alone can take care of all of them. The little foxes said this casually, but it immediately made Ruan Hongling's heart skip a beat. She thought to herself, Why are the members of this group so complicated? Why didn't they come earlier or later? Why did they choose this time? What does it mean to be a pioneer group? Is there a successor group? Why did they collectively rush to our country at this time? Chapter 675. The collective visit of the Japanese cultivation group immediately attracted the attention of the high-level officials of Japan, and their nerves were also highly tense. In the decades since the founding of the People's Republic, the Japanese Buddhist world had often visited each other on a large scale because of the same root and the same source. In particular, in recent years, a series of large-scale pilgrimages carried out by the Japanese Buddhist sects were quite frequent. Since 1984, almost every year, the Japanese Shingon sect would visit the country, either for Buddhist exchanges, tourism, or pilgrimages. The more influential one was that in 2004, the Japanese Shingon sect organized a visiting group of about 350 people to visit Fujian, and went on a pilgrimage to the Kaiyuan Temple in Fujian, where Master Hongfa had once lived. In addition, in January of the same year, Mount Koya University and the Hong Kong Buddhist Society jointly held a large-scale Buddhist exchange activity, leading the believers of Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan to walk the road of Konghai to the Holy Land of Tang. On April 9th of the same year, Master Ci Yuan, the abbot of Mount Koya Shingon Tantric sect, once again started the pilgrimage of Master Hongfa to the Tang dynasty, which attracted the attention of the Japanese cultivation world. Not only the Shingon sect, but also the Pure Land sect, the Tiantai sect, the Fahua sect, or other Japanese Buddhist sects had deep exchanges and contacts with the Chinese Buddhist cultivation world. For the high-level officials of Japan, this kind of activity was a common thing. However, it was the first time that the various sects of the Japanese cultivation world had mixed together and gone to the country under the banner of friendly exchanges. Although the high-level officials of Japan also believed that this group of cultivators would not do anything earth-shattering, such a group of great cultivators swaggered around, which made them extremely nervous. The Japanese cultivation world had deeply infiltrated the Japanese political scene, so the high-level officials of Japan could not organize this group of great cultivators to attack the hinterland of China aggressively. In desperation, they had to secretly greet the high-level officials of the country. "Boss, the cultivators here are a little naughty, and they want to go to your place to play. If they have any conflict with the local cultivators, it's none of our business." The Celestial Empire had always been relaxed in the open and monitored the cultivation world in the dark. Although they were vigilant in their hearts, they still agreed with the bearing of the Celestial Empire. "Don't worry, we have always been friends and neighbors. There won't be any conflict. Good neighborliness, harmony and stability are the main themes." However, the moment he hung up the phone, the higher-ups of the Fong clan issued an extremely strict order. They absolutely could not allow any form of friction between the two parties. Otherwise, if something happened and destroyed the current harmonious society and stable situation, they would have to bear the consequences. This order worried the officials of the Chinese Religious Council. They had been keeping a low profile all these years, afraid that they would appear in front of mortals and cause unnecessary trouble for the higher-ups. But now this bunch of Japanese had really taken the wrong medicine. They had actually come to China in groups regardless of sect or religion. How were they going to receive them? Although the scandal caused by the Japanese cultivation world a while ago had been very strictly controlled, some of the news had more or less reached the ears of these officials. At first, they were still somewhat gloating, but soon the Japanese cultivation world that had gone berserk made them unable to laugh. In order to deal with this situation, the council held an emergency meeting. Representatives of the major cultivation sects gathered together to discuss how to deal with this difficulty with worried faces. Most of these representatives used to be the best of the various sects in the cultivation world, and most of them were even the lineal descendants of the major sections. They were originally full of sharp cultivators, but after being officials for a long time, they had been contaminated with the atmosphere of bureaucracy. When they spoke, they were full of clichés and official words. The meeting had been held for a whole day, but it was still full of lifelessness and lethargy. No matter how hard they tried, they could not come to a conclusion. After the discussion, a group of bureaucrats in the cultivation world and cultivators in the officialdom looked at each other and had no idea at all. At this time, Liu Chunping, the Secretary General of the Council who presided over the meeting, suddenly became a little annoyed. He slapped the table and shouted, "This is all your fault. How do you want to clean it up? Don't you have any idea?" Liu Chunping had a big head, big ears, and a big belly. He looked like a proper bureaucrat. He slammed his fat palm on the table, causing the teacups on the table to jump up. At the moment when the teacup was about to fall, the middle-aged man closest to him reached out like lightning and held it steady. He laughed in a low voice and said, "Secretary General Liu, don't worry. This matter actually has nothing to do with us. We didn't cause it. It's Li Yundong who caused it." A few years ago, Liu Chunping had been assigned to this position of frontier officialdom after the Tofu Project case of the bridge. Although he was not a high-ranking official, he could be regarded as an old fox in the officialdom. Naturally, he had a thorough understanding of the whole matter in advance. Of course, he knew who Li Yundong was. Although his position was a bluff, it was in name only. He was poor. The power of the Yamen was even smaller than that of the Secretary General of a county committee, although he could be regarded as an official in the capital, who was behind Li Yundong, Li Yuanbua and Zhou Kachang. They were all high-ranking officials of the frontier. 200 years ago, they were all governors and inspector generals who had the power of life and death. What about him? At best, he was just a nobody in the Ministry of Rights, not even an assistant minister. Besides, the power of officialdom was intertwined and complicated. Who was standing behind Li Yuanbua and Zhou Kachang? Lu Chumping shuddered at the thought of it. How could he provoke such a character? It would have been better if the middle-aged man hadn't mentioned it. As soon as he did, he became angrier and angrier. He didn't accept the man's help to hold the teacup steady. He puffed up his eyes and shouted, "Nonsense! The focus now is how to deal with it. How to solve it. What's the use of investigating the problem?" His words made the representatives of the other sects look at each other and secretly curse in their hearts. "Didn't you start it just now? Humph, it's still you no matter what. It's still you no matter what." However, the representatives of the various sects had been in the officialdom for a long time, and they had all become very slippery. Although they were unhappy, they were all safe and sound like cowards. No one was willing to shoot the bird that stood out. Lu Chumping saw that everyone was like a gourd with its mouth cut off. He became more and more displeased. "Why are you all mute? Aren't you usually very talkative? Hey, Taoist priest Qingyang, didn't you always brag to me about how your Chuanjin dragon sect was? Why are you not willing to stand up at this time?" Taoist priest Qingyang, who was sitting next to him, was the man who had helped him hold the teacup steady before. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Secretary General Lu, this matter is too big. We can't handle it alone. Why don't you ask for the opinion of the Jingyi school?" The representative of the Jingyi school was Zhang Xiansheng, the uncle of the Lady of the Earthly Fire. Although he was in his 80s, he looked no different from a person in his 40s. He had good ears and eyes, was strong, and walked as fast as he could. However, when he heard Taoist priest Qingyang's words, he cursed in his heart and immediately pretended to be old, as if he had gone deaf at this moment. "Ah, what did you just say?" When the cultivators of the other sects saw that he was pretending to be deaf and dumb, they laughed in their hearts. Lu Chumping was so angry that he flew into a rage. He said angrily, "You won't say anything, will you? Well, then I'll make the decision myself." The representatives of the other sects suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and complimented him one after another. "Secretary General Lu, your idea must be good." Lu Chumping slapped the table and said angrily, "Bullsh*t. Didn't you just pretend to be deaf and dumb? Why do you all know how to speak now? Do you still want to use the centralized democracy of our party? How are you going to lead the people like this?" A fat middle-aged monk chanted Buddha's name. "Amipa, Secretary General Lu. As the saying goes, centralization of the people means that no matter what kind of people there are in the beginning, at the end of the day, centralization of power is still the final goal. So you make the decision, and we'll do as you say." Lu Chumping was so angry that he laughed. "Master Shi Jingming, your words are very meaningful. Are you implying that we are a dictatorship?" Shi Jingming hurriedly said, I don't dare. Lu Chumping said angrily, "All of you usually boast about yourselves and your sections. Today, in this kind of situation, all of you are pretending to be cowards. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Aren't you afraid of taking responsibility? So you're throwing all the responsibility to me? All right, I'll really take on this responsibility. No media is allowed to participate in this exchange activity of the Japanese cultivation world. In addition, all of you should inform your disciples to take it easy this time. Don't let anything happen. Otherwise, humph, if things get out of hand, you'll have to prepare to clean up after yourselves." When the representatives of the various sects heard this, they looked at each other and thought, "Take it easy? What do you mean by take it easy? This is too vague, isn't it?" After Lu Chumping finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something and laughed proudly. He thought to himself, "Humph, the higher-ups have thrown such a hot potato to me. Can't I throw it to someone else?" Thinking of this, he said loudly, "In addition, let the local provincial leaders of the religious world be responsible for receiving them. Anyway, wherever these Japanese go, let the local people of the religious world accompany them, and serve them carefully. Taoist Master Qingyang said cautiously, Secretary General Lu this. What does take it easy mean? What do you mean by take it easy? Lu Chumping was furious. Take it easy means take it easy. Don't you understand what I mean? Humph. After that, he slapped the table, scaring the representatives of the various sects, and making them scratch their ears and cheeks, frowning. Before long, another Taoist asked in a low voice, Secretary General Lu, do you want us to fight? No, let's take it easy when we're learning from each other? Lu Chumping glanced at him and chuckled. Taoist Master Su Jing of Mount Qingqing is so clever. When the cultivators of the other sects heard this, they were suddenly shocked. Taoist Master Qingyang said, Secretary General Lu, there are many capable people in the Japanese cultivation world. If the two sides are serious about learning from each other, whether we can win or not is secondary. But if we take it easy, Lu Chumping immediately looked at him unhappily. Who said that you can win? Who allowed you to win? The cultivators of the various sects were suddenly stunned, and they could hardly believe their ears. Shi Jing said, Secretary General Lu, do you mean we can't win a single match? Lu Chumping snorted. What if someone dies when you guys start fighting? What if you injure or disable our Japanese friends? How can I explain it to them? Do you want to cause conflict and disputes between the two countries? Please, now the relationship between the two countries is so complicated. Can you not cause trouble for the country? The representatives of the various sects said angrily. But can we only be beaten? What if our people are injured, crippled, or even killed? Lu Chumping was furious and thought to himself, you guys have always been used to being lawless. If it were 40 years ago, all of you would have been beaten to a pulp. You wouldn't have had the chance to talk nonsense here. However, he knew that these words could not be said. If he said it, he would be in big trouble. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. A smile appeared on his face, and he said in a gentle voice, That's not what I meant. I mean, you can just put on an act. Don't really fight, just pretend. It's not like you haven't done this kind of thing before. It's not a good thing to hurt someone on either side. You also know that it's not easy for the country to relax the religious policy. You don't want anything to happen at this time and force the country to tighten the policy again, do you? The representatives of the various sects and schools instantly went silent. All of them knew that it was the age of chaos right now. The cultivation world had declined to an unsightly state, and it was difficult for it to continue. Practically every single sect was trying their best to curry favor and develop with great difficulty. There was no one in the world who understood better than them the meaning of, the people don't fight with the officials, and religious forces don't fight with the imperial forces. After a long time, Taoist priest Qingyang whispered, Secretary General Lu, it doesn't seem good to lose one game, does it? If it gets out, what will others think of us? Lu Chumping sneered. Get out. Who will spread it? Who will report it? Please, the ban is so strict. Who can spread this kind of news? Don't worry, no one will know. In this world, if no one knows, isn't it the same as not having a chance? Well, that's it. Who told you not to make a decision? Listen up. If there is any competition in this fellowship party, you can only lose, not win. Note. The country manages the cultivation world, which is to say the religious world, by the State Bureau of Religious Affairs and other agencies. The subordinate agency is the National Religious Association. In order to avoid suspicion, it was changed to a council. Therefore, readers don't need to look into it. Thank you. In addition, if some readers think that this chapter is fake, how can there be such a brainless official? Before scolding people, please pay attention to the various relevant insider information of the State Sports Commission. You will find that the lower limit of brainlessness is even lower. As the saying goes, meat eaters are despicable. Chapter 676. What? You can't win? In the Supreme Elder Pavilion of Mount Qingqing, Zhang Huashui widened his eyes and shouted, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Zhang Tongtian, the leader of the Qingqing sect, nodded with a cold face and said, "Yes, Shibwa just called me." Zhang Huashui suddenly jumped 3 feet high and shouted angrily in Sichuan dialect, "Which son of a bitch's idea is this? His head is broken. You can't win. F***CK the Immortals. How could he come up with such a stupid idea? Playing the zither, really playing the zither. Where's Shibwa? I'll call him now." Zhang Huashui was as hot-tempered as Zhang Fei. He angrily took out his mobile phone and was about to make a call. But Zhang Tongtian shouted in a deep voice, "Sure D, what's the use of calling? This is the idea of the higher-ups. Do you want them to change their minds? Do you have such great ability? If you have such great ability, I'll let you be the sect leader, okay?" Zhang Huashui's neck was red. He panted and roared, "Do you want me to be beaten to my knees by these Japanese?" Zhang Tongtian's face was cold, and his eyes were full of anger. He clenched his fists tightly, and the power in his body was running wild, but there was no way to vent it. Seeing him like this, Zhang Huashui tried to persuade him. "Sure D, how can you swallow this? Why should we listen to these sons of B***cheese? Asking me to throw the game and lose to the Japanese? I can't do that. When the time comes, I'll kill 1 or 2 of them with my own hands and let them know how powerful I am." Zhang Tongtian shouted angrily, "Shut up. Do you think you're eating and drinking? Do you think it's as simple as killing cultivators from other sects?" Zhang Huashui straightened his neck and said angrily, "Aren't the Japanese human beings?" Zhang Tongtian suppressed his anger, took a deep breath, and said in a relatively calm voice, "Sure D, now our Qingqing sect seems to be strong, but in fact, we are strong on the outside. A while ago, someone sneaked into our sect and killed dozens of people. We didn't even have time to fight back or warn them. Do you know how bad of an impact this has brought to our sect? It's not like you haven't seen how many people have left the sect these days." Zhang Tongtian's body trembled slightly. He said, "However, it doesn't matter. No matter how depressed we are still a cultivation sect that has been passed down for more than 1,000 years. As long as there is no disaster, we can reproduce and survive. We can pass on the cultivation of the Qingqing sect to the world forever. But do you know what the consequences are if you anger an official?" Zhang Huashui was not convinced and said angrily, "Aren't those officials polite when they see us? Whoever makes me unhappy, I won't let them have it easy either." Zhang Tongtian couldn't help shouting angrily, "Idiot! That's because you have value." People treat you as a person of importance, so they treat you politely. If you dare to take advantage of them, then you can go flip through the Taoist canon and flip through the historical records. Has there ever been a cultivation sect in history that could remain unscathed after offending the nobility? Yes, you Zhang Huashui are a great cultivator. At worst, you can go anywhere in the world. Even if your body is destroyed, you can live freely with your yang spirit. But what about your disciple? What about your disciple's family? What about the huge industry of Mount Qingqing? Can you move it away? Can you take it with you? How are you going to face your ancestors in the future?" Zhang Huashui stopped talking. He held back his anger and clenched his fists. Although he was a straightforward person, he was not an idiot. After calming down a little, he naturally understood that if he was really impulsive, not only would the cultivators of other sects attack him, but even his Xixiang and Shibwa in the capital would also turn against him and put righteousness before family. Zhang Huashui suppressed his anger and said, "Xixiang, what should we do?" Zhang Tongtian said with a cold face, "It's very simple. Just wait and see. Let's see how the Jingyi school will deal with it." Zhang Huashui remembered that there were more troublesome sects than them, such as the Jingyi school and the Chuanjin dragon sect. The anger in his heart suddenly dissipated a lot. He snorted and said, "At worst, I won't participate in this sorority. A get-together? What the hell? A group of Japanese people came to our country. What good can they do? Damn it, the brains of these officials are broken, and they're still bowing and scraping, acting so subservient. Damn it, do they think they will look up to us just because of this?" Zhang Tongtian didn't comment. He thought for a while and said, Let's not talk about this for the time being. I believe that this news will soon spread throughout the cultivation world. At that time, it will not be our Qingqing sect who will be angry. Anyway, we won't be the first to stand out. Let's see what other sects do. If someone dares to fight for real and win, then we will fight for real and win. If no one dares to stand out, then we might as well hide. Anyway, it's not our family that will lose face. Zhang Huashui snorted angrily and stamped his foot. A hard blue brick under his foot was crushed like flour. He snorted angrily and said, I feel suffocated just thinking about it. Seeing that he was so angry, Zhang Tongtian couldn't help but persuade him. You'd better not think about it. Think about how to deal with Li Yundong at the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect. Zhang Huashui suddenly became angry. He laughed angrily and said, That son of a bitch. I've wanted to fight with him for a long time. It's a good time to settle old and new grudges together. On that day, I'm going to ask him why he wanted to kill the people of our Qingqing sect. Zhang Tongtian said in a low voice. The murderer may not be him. It's too early to draw a conclusion. Zhang Huashui snorted and said, Even if it's not him, it must have something to do with him. It must have something to do with the Fox Zen school. He is the leader of the Fox Zen school. If we don't look for him, who else can we look for? Humph. It's fine if he doesn't come to the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect. If he does, I will definitely teach him a lesson. How dare a small Fox Zen school behave atrociously in Mount Qingqing? Zhang Tongtian didn't comment. After a while, he sighed slowly and said, Yes, I'm afraid that he won't come. Just as Zhang Tongtian and Zhang Huashui were privately criticizing each other, the whole cultivation world in China was in an uproar because of the news that they could only lose and not win. Although the cultivators of all sects were seething with resentment for a while, the experienced and prudent cultivators of the sects quickly suppressed this resentment. In their opinion, since they could only lose, no one could laugh at each other, and the news could not spread. The threat of the Japanese cultivation world was just a scourge. The upcoming inauguration ceremony of the head of the Linggong sect, which was about to be held by the Jingyi school, was a serious problem. If Zi Yuan successfully took over as the head of the Linggong sect, how would the structure of the cultivation world evolve? Would she continue to follow the leadership of the Jingyi school? If Zi Yuan failed to take over as the head of the Linggong sect, would the Jingyi school annex the Linggong sect? If the annexation was successful, how would the power structure of the cultivation world change? Moreover, in this inauguration ceremony, how would Li Wudi, who had a close personal relationship with Zi Yuan, react? If he supported Zi Yuan, what kind of changes would it cause? Regarding this, the cultivators of various sects could be said to have their eyes wide open. They held their breaths and waited for the arrival of the day of the succession ceremony. However, there were also many cultivators of all sects who didn't take the inauguration ceremony seriously. Instead, they took the collective visit of the Japanese cultivation group as a big deal. In the Longmen building of Tian'an City, Du Fei was originally concentrating on dealing with the documents in front of him, but soon he was disturbed by a hurried knock on the door. He raised his head and said, Please come in. Soon, the door of his office was pushed open by a young beauty in professional A1 clothes. Behind her stood a man with extremely sharp eyes. It was Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. When Du Fei saw them, he immediately frowned slightly. He turned his head and said to the secretary, who was waiting for his signature, You go out for a while. The secretary obediently retreated. When Wei Qing saw her close the door, she immediately rushed to the table, pressed her hands on the table, and said angrily, Shi Xiang, have you heard? Du Fei put down his pen unhurriedly, leaned back in the large boss's chair, and said, What did you hear? Wei Qing patted the document in front of him and said angrily, You must know. Don't pretend. It's a matter where you can only lose and not win. Du Fei sighed. As soon as I saw you two come in, I knew it was about this. What? You don't expect me to turn the tide, do you? Yu Sheng, who had always been quiet, also said in a deep voice, Shi Xiang, You have a wide network of people. Maybe you can pass a message to the higher-ups. How can this work? You can only lose and not win? How can you say such absurd words? What do you think the people of Huaxiao are? Du Fei rubbed his temples with both hands and said with a bitter face, You two are really hot-blooded. It's obvious that the officials don't want to be implicated, so they made this idea. However, you can't be so naive as to think that I can make them change the result just by passing a word to them. Can you? Don't be kidding. You know how to save face, but don't the officials know? If you take back what you just said, aren't you just slapping him in the face? Wei Qing's pretty face turned pale with anger. She said angrily, Should we lose face? Xixiang, you are the most resourceful. Hurry up and think of a way. Du Fei waved his hand and said, There's no way at all. This is a dead end. If you can't do it, don't think about it. Well, at least I can't do it. Wei Qing's heart skipped a beat and she asked tentatively, Then who can do it? Yu Xing suddenly blurted out, Li Yundong. Wei Qing's eyes lit up. Yes, he must have a way. Seeing that she was about to turn around and leave, Du Fei immediately stopped her and said, Hey, are you crazy? Don't you know that the Medicine King tripod made a lot of noise a while ago? Don't harm Li Yundong. You won't be able to solve this problem. Wei Qing and Yu Xing looked at each other, and a trace of despair and unwillingness flashed in their eyes. Are we going to swallow our anger and be humiliated? Du Fei pondered for a while and said, Go find someone. Maybe he has a way. Wei Qing and Yu Xing quickly asked nervously, Who? Chapter 677. Seeing the nervous expressions on Wei Qing and Yu Sheng's faces, Du Fei immediately laughed and said, You know this person too. He's our Shirbois. Wei Qing stamped her feet and said, Xixiang, there are several Shirbois. Which one is it? However, Yu Xing suddenly had an idea and said tentatively, Could it be Shirbois Mi Jingzi? Mi Jingzi was the Taoist name of Zhang Jishuan, the abbot of Yuchan Palace in Hainan. When Du Fei heard this, he nodded approvingly at him and said, Yes, Shirbois Mi Jingzi has a wide range of friends, and he once served as the executive director of the National Taoist Association. He is also a highly respected cultivator, so his words carry much more weight than mine. Go and ask him, and see what he thinks. Wei Qing looked at Yu Sheng in surprise and laughed. You're a blockhead, but you're quite quick-witted today. Not bad. Yu Xing snorted softly. Let's go and find Shirbois Mi Jingzi. After that he turned around and walked out. Wei Qing quickly shouted, Hey, wait for me. Waizu, they were almost there. The two of them rushed to Dingan County in Hainan without stopping. By the time they arrived at Yuchan Palace, it was already a few hours later. Because they were from the same sect, Wei Qing and Yu Sheng arrived at Yuchan Palace. After seeing Zhang Jishuan's two disciples and reporting their identities, they were immediately warmly received by the two Taoists, one tall and one short. The tall Taoist smiled and said, It turns out that the little Shirji of our sect is here. Please come in. What are you doing here? Zhang Jishuan's seniority was extremely high, so his disciples' seniority had also risen. Therefore, when they saw the two cultivators of the Chuanjin dragon sect, one was young and handsome, and the other was young and lovely, they thought that they were a few generations lower than them. However, Wei Qing was unwilling to be at a disadvantage. She said angrily, You're the Shirji. Du Fei and we are fellow disciples. According to seniority, we should be of the same generation. The tall Taoist raised his head and laughed. Yes, then I'll call you Little Shimmy. Wei Qing snorted. When did you enter the sect? Tell me. Maybe I'm your Shirbois. Yu Xing couldn't stand it anymore. He glared at Wei Qing and said, Stop it. We're here to look for Uncle Master Mi Jingzi. Who would have the time to dawdle here? When Wei Qing heard this, she made a face and said, Well, for your sake, I won't care about this now. After that, she said to the short Taoist beside her with a smile, Where's Shirbois Mi Jingzi? We need to talk to him about something. The short Taoist usually cultivated in seclusion, with his senior martial brother, in the Jade Toad Palace. He almost never stepped out of the door. He barely left the Dingan district. Not to mention the outside world. He had not even seen many of his fellow Taoists in the cultivation world. Although Wei Qing's beauty was not as good as that of Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others, she was still a rare beauty. In particular, she was slender and well-proportioned, and her voice was as pleasant as a skylark's. Her smile almost made the short Taoist's soul disappear. He quickly calmed down and focused his mind. After calming himself down a little, he took Wei Qing and Yu Sheng to Zhang Jishuan's residence. When they arrived at Zhang Jishuan's residence, Wei Qing saw that Zhang Jishuan lived in a rather simple bungalow. The doors and windows of the room were all made of wood, and the furnishings in the room were extremely simple. Except for a table, a few stools, a futon, a bed, and a sword hanging on the wall, there was nothing else. At a glance, Wei Qing saw that Zhang Jishuan was standing in front of the table, holding a brush and writing calmly. She quickly stood to the side and took a look, only to see that he was writing a couplet. The first line was, "Stealing Kunlun longevity wine," but he was writing the second line. The short Taoist and the tall Taoist led Wei Qing and Yu Sheng to Zhang Jishuan's room. When the tall Taoist saw that Zhang Jishuan didn't even raise his head, as if he hadn't seen them, he couldn't help but say, "Master, there are guests." Zhang Jishuan remained silent and continued writing calmly. The tall Taoist said again, "Master, they are junior martial brothers and sisters of the same sect." Wei Qing, who was standing to one side, immediately muttered in a low voice, "It's hard to say who is older and who is younger." Zhang Jishuan still didn't say anything, nor did he raise his head. However, he couldn't put down the brush for a long time. After waiting with them for a while, the short Taoist couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at his Shixiang, stepped forward, grabbed the brush from Zhang Jishuan's hand, and said, "Master, there are guests. It's not good for you to neglect them like this, is it?" Zhang Jishuan finally raised his head. His sharp eyes, which seemed to be able to see through people's hearts, glanced at Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. He glared at his two disciples with a sullen face and said, "Don't I have eyes?" As he said this, he smiled at Wei Qing and Yu Sheng. "So it's you. When you were young, I went to attend your master's apprenticeship ceremony." Wei Qing saw Zhang Jishuan's sage-like face. Although he was only 100 years old, he was hale and hearty, and his eyes were sharp. Even young people like her were no match for him. She couldn't help but admire him, and thought to herself, "It's said that Shibuami Jingzi is a very low-key great cultivator." When the 5 masters of lightning retribution in the world were ranked, if he hadn't kept a low profile and not participated, I'm afraid that he would have had a place among the 5 masters of lightning retribution in the world. Even Yu Sheng, who was young and arrogant, restrained his spirit in front of Zhang Jishuan. He bowed respectfully, and then quickly told Zhang Jishuan the purpose of their visit. After that, Wei Qing said, "Shibuami Jingzi, now you're the only one who can stand up for him. Hurry up and think of a way." Zhang Jishuan sighed softly, shook his head, and didn't say anything. Soon, Wei Qing and Yu Sheng's hearts suddenly skipped a beat. Wei Qing knew that something was wrong and quickly asked, "Shibua, what's wrong? Can't you do anything about it?" Zhang Jishuan sighed and said, "There is a way, but I don't think it's the right way to decide everything by the outcome of a fight. The ultimate goal of cultivation is to live forever, ascend to immortality, and explore the ultimate mystery of the human body and the universe. I believe that when your master first taught you how to cultivate, it was not for you to fight, was it not?" Wei Qing smiled bitterly and said, "Shibua, now that the Japanese are right in front of us, what's the use of saying this? Hurry up and say hello to the higher-ups. They can only lose, but they can't win. Who can bear this?" Zhang Jishuan was silent for a while, then suddenly said, "I think you're mistaken about one thing." Wei Qing asked curiously, "What is it?" Zhang Jishuan said, "I know more or less about the Japanese cultivation world. Although the Japanese cultivation world has been stagnant in recent hundreds of years, and has rarely made any progress, most of the power of Japanese cultivators comes from religious beliefs, so their power is inherited. Moreover, for thousands of years, the Japanese cultivation world has never been cut off. No matter how the situation in Japan changes, the Japanese cultivation world can always find a way out in the great changes, cater to the changes, make changes, and further accumulate their own strength. On the other hand, the Huaxia cultivation world, which was at its peak during the Song, Yuan Ming and Ming dynasties, was once so powerful that the Japanese didn't even dare to look at us directly. But now, in the past 100 years, almost all the elites of the cultivation world have been lost. Alas, the river is going from bad to worse. Wei Qing was angry when she heard this. She argued, "But Sherbois, no matter what, we won't lose to these Japanese. If we can fight fairly, I don't believe that we will lose to them." Zhang Jishuan glanced at Wei Qing, and then at Yu Sheng. He smiled and said, "Then answer me. Why couldn't you even beat a teenage girl at the Taoist assembly? Could it be that you two inner disciples are inferior to a little baby?" Wei Qing blushed and said unconvincingly, "She is the future goddess of the Tachibana family, not a nobody." Yu Sheng pondered for a while and said, "Sherbois, you mean? Because the Japanese cultivation world has never been cut off for thousands of years, and it is a country where all the people believe in religion. The power of faith is extremely strong, so it is very easy for their cultivators to cultivate. Is that right?" Zhang Jishuan nodded. "That's right. Except for a few great cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world, who can overcome their narrow-minded racism, and seriously and humbly learn from our Huaxia cultivation world, and eventually cultivate to the highest realm. It is very difficult for the rest of the cultivators to step into the real peak realm. Do you know why?" Yu Sheng said. "Is it because it is too easy for them to get their strength, so when they cultivate to a higher realm in the future, they can't climb up?" Zhang Jishuan smiled and said, "You're a smart boy. Now do you know why many cultivators in the Japanese cultivation world have gone to Hua to learn from us over the years? Now some Japanese cultivators have also discovered this. They believe that only by learning from others can they achieve positive results. However, the views of such people are not valued in the Japanese cultivation world, and they are even severely suppressed." Wei Qing asked with a puzzled face, "But, Sherbois, what does this have to do with what you said before?" Zhang Jishuan shook his head and sighed. "There's something wrong with your comprehension. Didn't I say it before? The Japanese get their strength quickly and easily. So do you think that even if someone sets a rule for you that you can only lose and not win, you will definitely win?" Wei Qing was very unhappy when she heard this. "Sherbois, what do you mean? Isn't this boosting the morale of others and destroying our own prestige?" Zhang Jishuan smiled and said, "Then do you know what it means to know yourself and know your enemy? Come on, let me ask you, are there any yin-yang masters among the Japanese cultivators who came this time?" Wei Qing immediately nodded and said, "Yes, there are yin-yang masters from the Abe family and the Kumo family." Zhang Jishuan asked again, "These two families are yin-yang master families with hundreds or even thousands of years of tradition. Do you know who they are?" Wei Qing said as if she was counting her family treasures, "The patriarchs of the two families are here." Zhang Jishuan smiled and said, "Abe is right, Kumo. These two are great masters in the Japanese cultivation world. Among the cultivators of the younger generation in the Hua cultivation world, no one is a match for them." As soon as he said this, his two disciples were immediately unhappy. The taller disciple shouted, "Master, am I that old? No matter what, I am still a cultivator of the younger generation, right? How can I not beat these two old Japanese?" Zhang Jishuan glared at them and said, "You two are Jinshin masters that I helped you open up your meridians with qi and countless elixirs. How many times have you fought? Apart from the number of times you have practiced with each other on a daily basis, can you count the number of fingers on your hands? You don't even have any actual combat experience, yet you want to fight with others? I'm laughing my head off. Do you know how dangerous it is to fight with masters of their level? If you are not careful, your body and soul will be destroyed. You two little Jinshin, what are you showing off for? It's as if you're afraid that others won't know." The tall Taoist and the short Taoist were blushing from his scolding, They kept quiet and kept quiet. Wei Qing, however, widened her eyes and looked at the two of them with new eyes. Wow, are you two Jinshin masters? That's amazing. Yu Xing looked at them enviously. But then he lowered his eyes, a trace of unwillingness and indignation flashing in them. Zhang Jishuan shook his head and said to Wei Qing, "Don't pay attention to these two guys who have never seen the world. How dare they speak so arrogantly with a small Jinshin? They are really frogs at the bottom of a well." In addition to the Onmyoji, do you know who else in the Japanese cultivation world has come? Wei Qing thought for a moment and said, "There are also the abbots of the Tiantai sect, the Pure Land sect, the Fahua sect, the True Word sect, and other Buddhist sects, as well as the great priests and goddesses of many Japanese Shinto cultivation sections." Zhang Jishuan looked worried. He shook his head and said, "This time, they have come out in full force. All the masters of the Japanese cultivation world have come. Not to mention others. I have seen the sect master of the Tiantai sect, Imagawa Kagumo. His cultivation is earth-shattering. Even I dare not say that I can win. As for the Pure Land sect, they are even more powerful. Their sect master, Masamura Siyuan, is a great cultivator. In the current cultivation world of China, I'm afraid that only the former Wang Yuanshan and the current Zhang Tianshi can match him. As for the others, alas." Wei Qing was dumbfounded and stammered, "What do you mean? Even if we fight fairly, we can't win." Zhang Jishuan sighed and said, "They came prepared as a group, but we are scattered sand. We are hindered from all sides, and we are besieged both internally and externally. Everyone has their own plans, and every sect has their own plans. How should we deal with such a situation?" Wei Qing straightened her neck and said, "I don't believe that the Japanese are monolithic. There are many people from the Shinto sect here. The Shinto sect has always been at odds with the Buddhists. I don't believe that they can work together." Zhang Jishuan said, "You're right, but the power of the Shinto sect is still above that of the Japanese Buddhism. The great priest of the Ayase Shinto, Ayase Shinguang, is also a great cultivator. His strength is not inferior to that of Masamura Siyuan. The goddess, Ayase Chuyan, is a weirdo in the Japanese female cultivation world. She is a genius that is rarely seen in 100 years. Moreover, she inherited the power of the gods of the Japanese Shinto sect. She is a female expert at the level of the Ksitagarbha goddess. In terms of fighting, except for Masako Tachibana, who can mobilize the power of the immortal Wisdom King, no one else is her match." Wei Qing was stunned. "Ah, how could a little girl be more powerful than Zhang Tianshi? It can't be, can it? This is too exaggerated, isn't it?" Zhang Jishuan shook his head and said, "No, the cultivators of the Shinto sect can only exert 100% of their strength in the shrine." Wei Qing patted her chest and said, "I was scared to death. I thought that a young girl like her could beat Zhang Tianshi. That's really unreasonable. If Zhang Tianshi appears, will he be able to defeat the Japanese cultivators?" Zhang Jishuan shook his head again. "No, given Zhang Tianshi's character, he will definitely not come out of seclusion to take care of these things. Moreover, Zhang Tianshi has already passed the thunder tribulation, and the spring thunderstorm season is coming. At that time, it is very likely that he will break through the 9th stage of the thunder tribulation and reach the great way of the golden immortal. It can be said that he has already taken half a step into the immortal world. How could he care about these secular affairs?" Wei Qing forced a smile and said, "There must be someone who can deal with them, right? At least Sherbois, you can deal with them, right?" However, Zhang Jishuan had a rare serious expression on his face. He said slowly, "No, I can't go." As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Qing, Yu Sheng, and his two disciples immediately exclaimed, "Why?" Chapter 678. Zhang Jishuan's two disciples were surprised and said angrily, "Master, the enemy is here. How can you not come out of the mountain?" Zhang Jishuan shook his head. "No, you can't fight in this battle. I advise you not to go." Wei Qing looked at Zhang Jishuan disappointedly. "Sherbois, I thought you were a strong cultivator who was not afraid of these bureaucratic nonsense. I didn't expect you to be the same as Shi Xiang and the others." Zhang Jishuan sighed and said, Little Shirji, have you ever thought about why I'm hiding in Dingan County at the corner of Tiannan and secretly taking care of my disciples? Wei Qing's heart suddenly trembled when she heard this. She thought to herself, yes, Shirbo used to be the chairman of the Taoist Association. Why did he end up living in this remote place? Wei Qing asked tentatively, Shirbo, did he offend someone? Or? Zhang Jishuan waved his hand and said, Don't mention the past anymore. Besides, I've already sworn that I will never fight with anyone again. Therefore, I can't go to this battle, nor can I speak for you, because I can't speak either. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng were greatly disappointed, and their faces were gloomy. Zhang Jishuan smiled slightly and comforted them. Don't think about it anymore. If you don't want to lose, then don't participate in this battle. You can't afford to provoke them, but you can always hide. Moreover, this time, the Japanese cultivation world has come prepared. They are coming aggressively, and it's definitely not a good situation. It's very dangerous. As the saying goes, it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. When you all become great cultivators, it won't be too late to get back at them. Yusheng didn't say anything, but his clenched fists had already betrayed his thoughts. Wei Qing, on the other hand, said in a low voice with an extremely heavy heart, Shirbo, we understand. If you have nothing else to say, we'll go first. Zhang Jishuan sighed softly and said, Well, go. In the path of cultivation, you can't fight for a short time. Take a long-term view. Wei Qing and Yu Sheng had come excitedly and left dejectedly. Seeing Wei Qing leave, Zhang Jishuan's short disciple couldn't help turning his head and shouting at Zhang Jishuan, Master, if you don't want to go, can't you let us go? The taller disciple also said angrily, Yes, master, we didn't swear that we couldn't go. Zhang Jishuan snorted, Fine, your legs are on your bodies anyway. Do you think I'd lock you up? His two disciples were overjoyed. Master, you agree? Zhang Jishuan sneered and said, If you go, don't come back, and don't call me master again. The tall Taoist and the short Taoist's faces fell. The tall Taoist shouted, Why? Zhang Jishuan said with a cold expression, Because I don't want to see you all throw away your lives. I didn't bring you all out to throw away your lives. If anything happens to you all, who will inherit my legacy? His two disciples immediately stopped talking. After they looked at each other, they suppressed their anger and said, Master, I understand. After that, they swallowed their anger and left Zhang Jishuan's room. Zhang Jishuan watched them leave and sighed heavily. He picked up the brush again and wanted to continue writing the second half of the couplet. But every time he raised the brush and was about to put it down, he felt that the brush in his hand was as heavy as Mount Tai, and his heart was in a mess. After a long time, Zhang Jishuan, who had been unable to write, suddenly put the brush in his hand down in frustration. The soft tip of the brush suddenly became like the sharp tip of a spear, piercing into the hard mahogany table with a poof, and standing upright on the table like a flagpole. Zhang Jishuan stared at the brush in front of him, his eyes flickering. After a long time, he suddenly turned around and strode in the direction of Haikou City. He walked all the way. Although he was nearly 100 years old, his footsteps were as fast as the wind, and his body was as swift as a galloping horse. In addition, he chose to walk in sparsely populated places, so along the way, he was even faster than a speeding car on the highway. When he was about to reach Haikou City, Zhang Jishuan slowed down and went straight to the National Hotel on Holiday Beach. After arriving at the National Hotel, Zhang Jishuan hesitated for a moment at the door, then strode into the hotel and went straight to Li Yundong's room. After knocking on the door for a while, Zhang Jishuan found that the person who opened the door was a tall, beautiful woman with an extraordinary temperament. Zhang Jishuan was stunned. Excuse me, does Li Yundong live here? This woman was none other than Zi Yuan, who was responsible for guarding Li Yundong today. When Zi Yuan saw Zhang Jishuan, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She asked tentatively, Are you Taoist Mi Jingzi? Zhang Jishuan laughed. Do you know me? Zi Yuan quickly bowed respectfully and said with a smile, Taoist, please come in. I'm Zi Yuan of the Linggong sect. Zhenren, please come in. I'm sorry I didn't go out to welcome you. Zhang Jishuan waved his hand and walked in with a smile. You don't have to be so polite, Zhenren Ziyuan. Your name is well known to me. As he said this, he looked at Ziyuan seriously and couldn't help nodding and praising her. Well, you are indeed a famous female cultivator. Not bad, not bad. Even Wang Yuanshan didn't have such a cultivation quotient as you back then. You are really better than him. Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, Taoist, you flatter me. I just got to where I am today by chance. In terms of cultivation quotient, how could I dare to look up to you? Zhang Jishuan chuckled. He stroked his beard and said, Well, don't flatter me. I didn't come here today to listen to your praise. Ziyuan smiled and said, Zhenren Zhang, are you here to see Li Yundong? Zhang Jishuan smiled and said, You are so smart. You guessed my intention at once. Ziyuan couldn't help but look at Li Yundong, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor and meditating. After Li Yundong read the Vajra longevity power that you passed to him, he couldn't restrain his excitement, so he specially asked us to protect him and cultivate here. Zhang Jishuan looked at Li Yundong strangely, shook his head and sighed. I have lived for so many years, but this is the first time I have seen someone cultivating in meditation in a hotel. It's really him. However, since the Tao of cultivation has been enlightened, it is indeed necessary to enter meditation immediately. Otherwise, if the time is delayed, it will be twice the effort with half the result. As he said this, he walked to the front of Li Yundong and looked at him fixedly for a while. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and his murderous fingers were like spears and swords, stabbing toward Li Yundong's forehead. This move was as fast as lightning, as fast as thunder, and it happened so suddenly that even Ziyuan was shocked. She immediately reached out subconsciously to grab Zhang Jishuan's wrist. She knew that if Zhang Jishuan's finger went down, he could even poke a hole in a rock, let alone a person's forehead. However, in the blink of an eye, Zhang Jishuan's swift and violent finger rushed to Li Yundong's forehead and stopped 2 centimeters away. At this time, Ziyuan's hand also suddenly froze in midair, 2 inches away from Zhang Jishuan's hand. Zhang Jishuan saw that Li Yundong seemed to be unaware of his finger, and his face was still calm, and without any reaction. He nodded slightly and said, Not bad, not thinking, not doing, not forgetting about things in me. This is the real realm of the unity of heaven and man, the realm of spiritual travel. Only then did Ziyuan feel relieved. Her heart, which had jumped into her throat, fell back into her chest. She knew that Zhang Jishuan had just been purely testing Li Yundong's realm and the depth of his meditation at this time. With Li Yundong's current cultivation realm, even if he was in meditation, if someone wanted to sneak attack him from the outside world, he would immediately subconsciously defend himself. This kind of defense was the instinctive reaction of a great cultivator at the Jinshin level, Niden and primordial spirit. If Li Yundong was not deep in meditation at this time, and had not entered the realm of forgetting about things, and being one with heaven and man, he would immediately wake up and fight back after being poked by Zhang Jishuan's finger. But once a great cultivator entered the realm of yang spirit leaving the body, spiritual travel, even if ordinary people chopped off their heads with a knife, they would not wake up. It could be said that at this time, great cultivators would have no strength to truss a chicken, and ordinary children could stab them to death with a knife. This was also the reason why Li Yundong wanted to find someone to protect him. Ziyuan asked tentatively, Taoist Mi Jingzi, do you know when Li Yundong will wake up? Zhang Jishuan smiled and said, I'm not an immortal. How would I know? I came here this time because if Zhenren Li hasn't left yet, I want to compare notes with him on cultivation. But I didn't expect him to be so eager that he would enter meditation and cultivate here. I really admire him. Ziyuan smiled and said, Isn't that because the classics you wrote are so exquisite that he can't help himself? Zhang Jishuan smiled and said, I didn't write all of them. They were all passed on to me by my master. I just sorted them out. As he said this, he glanced at the Vajra longevity skill that was spread out beside Ziyuan and suddenly asked, Did you also read this? Ziyuan said with some fear, Yes, if you think it's inappropriate then I Zhang Jishuan waved his hand and suddenly asked, "What is Vajra skill?" Ziyuan was stunned, but she quickly realized that Zhang Jishuan was testing her. She immediately replied, "Vajra skill is a kind of external skill that trains the body and the internal organs. The trick is to use the rigid internal strength qi in the body to dredge the meridians of the whole body, so that the body can be as strong as Vajra." Zhang Jishuan didn't comment and asked again, "What is longevity skill?" Just as Ziyuan was about to speak, she suddenly heard a knock on the door. Su Chan's clear voice came from outside the door. "Sister Ziyuan, we're back." After that, she and Zhou Qin pushed the door open and entered, followed by Lu Feier, who was talking and laughing with her. Chao Kefi was behind Lu Feier. Ziyuan glanced at them. Just as she was about to stand up and introduce them to Zhang Jishuan suddenly shouted, "The Great Way is in front of you. Why are you distracted?" Ziyuan suddenly shivered and no longer looked at Su Chan, Zhou Qin and the others. She respectfully replied to Zhang Jishuan, "Longevity skill is an internal skill that trains the mind and cultivates the innate qi of people. Its trick is to focus on relaxation and nature, concentrate on using many soft curved movements, communicate the innate qi of heaven and earth, and blend it with the primordial qi of the internal organs of the human body, so that people can enter the gate of Xian Pin, refine the essence into qi, refine the qi into the spirit, and return the 5 qi to the origin. Finally, it can reach the Wuji realm of refining the spirit to return to the void, returning to Wuji, forgetting everything, and becoming one with nature." Zhang Jishuan nodded. "Then tell me which is more important, Vajra skill or longevity skill?" At this time, Zhou Qin and Su Chan, who had just entered the door, also realized that the old man in a white shirt, a black hat, and a half-foot-long white beard in front of them must be Zhang Jishuan, the author of Vajra longevity skill. Zhou Qin immediately turned around and made a silent gesture to Lu Feier and Chao Kefi. She said in a low voice, "Zhenren Zhang is passing on his skills. Let's not disturb them. Let's leave." Su Chan looked at Zhang Jishuan curiously and said in a low voice, "But Zhenren Zhang doesn't seem to want to drive us away. Sister Zhou Qin, why don't we listen from the side?" Zhou Qin also wanted to listen to Zhang Jishuan's teachings. After all, this kind of opportunity was not something that ordinary people could encounter. She glanced at Su Chan and said tentatively in a low voice, "Then, just listen to a few words?" Su Chan also smiled slyly and nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Yes, just a few words." Like thieves, the two of them entered the room quietly. As soon as they sat down, they turned their heads and saw Lu Feier and Chao Kefi standing at the door in a daze, at a loss for what to do. Zhou Qin quickly made a gesture to them to close the door, indicating for them to go out and close the door. However, because of her relationship with Li Yundong, Lu Feier had long been full of curiosity and admiration for him. Therefore, when she saw a Taoist priest preaching in the room, her curiosity and gossiping soul suddenly burned. After closing the door behind her, she pulled Chao Kefi into the room quietly. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."